Welcome to episode 31 of the Coast AFL Podcast with Nick and Blaze and special guest HarryBCasts. This week, we are covering the prelims because they have obviously just happened. We do our normal rundowns on those. We do the grand final preview. We cover the Brownlow medal, Mark of the Year, Goal of the Year, a couple of retirements, and just a couple of little bits here and there as well. So let's jump straight into it. I will start with you, Harry. How are you doing? Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, I'm doing pretty well on this gloomy Melbourne day.
Yeah, it's miserable.
It's been awful. This has been an awful day for weather, but a good day to sit in and talk about some footy.
Absolutely. And Mr. Cyrek, how are you?
Yes. Just rushed back from a meeting to get here. Sort of been a busy weekend. Some good things. Obviously, one not so good things that we'll have a comprehensive coverage on. But again, just looking forward for day of celebration because we're going to celebrate some footy, and also it is my 30th birthday. So
yes, it is. You are old as hell.
Old as hell. Oh, look, I'm going to be spending the rest of this podcast talking about the good old days of football, flood defensive, rolling mauls, and Joel Bowden taking 11 consecutive rush behinds.
Hey, there's a reason that rule was introduced. There's always a Richmond reason.
Yeah. So,
as for me, this week's been pretty good for me, actually. My boss is away on holiday, so work is pretty chill, which is hella nice. Let's jump straight into retirement. So we will start with probably the more prolific one, being Zac Tuohy, with Geelong no longer being obviously eligible to make the grand final because they were eliminated. This officially means that Zac Tuohy has retired. So let's celebrate his career a little bit. Broke Jim Stein. The big key thing, obviously, is that he's Irish and he broke Jim Steins' games record, which is massive.
Yep.
Yeah.
And sort of...
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah. Crap. I was going to say, I'm pretty sure it was recruited from directly Gaelic football. I'm not sure exactly. I read an article earlier. So I apologize. Look, I didn't have much time in between coming back and this podcast, so a few of my notes are a bit, but yeah, picked round 6, pick 73 in the 2009 rookie draft. So we are talking about a very, very low
specifically
draft pick. I think
pick it was before 102.
Yeah. No. 102 was the second time he was drafted because he got delisted.
That's right, actually.
Because he didn't have the fastest start to his career. Obviously, very much a project player. Because I do remember it vaguely.
Well,
because
funnily enough, he was a Carlton reject, like a lot of suddenly good players.
Yeah, look, I mean, it was very. Unfortunately, Carlton got a lot of people from other clubs and made them worse, and shipped off a lot of people that got better. So. Shout out to Eddie Betts. But yeah, look, honestly, for the sort of player he was, very fast paced, obviously. I think actually deceptively, I was looking back at his stats. I always thought he was a bit of a ball burner, from half back, but he was actually not too bad. He just probably didn't work his way into the game enough at times. But obviously the big turning point in his career, because he did have an excellent last season at Carlton. Funnily enough, I remember talking about one of my friends about Carlton and their prospects, and he was like, Zac Tuohy is a person in the backline you can build around. I didn't believe him, and then shut up fairly well. And then, on his best year, one requested trade out of Carlton, as players tend to do at that point in time. And
during that era, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was a very interesting trade. I had a look at it. Carlton got Billy Smets from Geelong, which was obviously not that great, and they ended up getting a few picks that turned into okay players. I think they got Darcy Fogarty from one of the picks that was Geelong's next year pick, but was on-traded. It was very weird. Brisbane ended up winning that one because they eventually got the pick that would get them a player that did pretty well on the weekend, which was it's the other winger that's not Jared Berry. I've totally blanked. Yeah. Zach Bailey.
That's
So pretty big trade that, sort of went on there. And obviously, his story of Geelong turned into a very versatile player. His craft in the back line only improved from there. Very good mark. Got his intercept game up a bit more. And obviously, he was fast enough to go on the wing. And occasionally, he would, he did it at Carlton as well, but swing down forward as well. Using his marking abilities, using that pace, obviously, to generate leads, and just, I think, reliable is the best way to put it. And yeah, as said, not only was he the Irish Games winner, he became the third Irishman to win a grand final after, along with Mark O'Connor, winning at the same time in that 2022 win for Geelong. And yeah, that's basically the overview.
there's not really, apart from the Irish background, it's not really too much of note.
Well, he's a 5-time All-Australian player, to be fair. 2012, 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. And then obviously winning the premiership with Geelong in 2022 as well. Like his career, he doesn't seem like a player that really pops up in your head as someone that you think is really, really elite. But his career and the honors that he has, it shows that he has had those massively consistent performances since joining the Cats. Really, obviously Carlton were in a really bad slump at the time when he was with Carlton. I mean, his best year of 2012 with Carlton, where his first All-Australian jersey, Carlton was still 10th on the ladder at that time. They were still in that mid to bottom tier kind of area there. So revitalizing his career at Geelong massively, and then earning consistent All-Australian jerseys afterwards, and then a premiership as well. It just shows just how tenacious he was, and just really how elite he turned out to be.
Yeah, no, as I said, absolutely. And it's one of those things where it's like, I think a lot of it's also just got to do with how much Stewart's gotten the conversation shifted in that Geelong backline. But honestly, for, especially the Cats, who obviously transitioned from such an elite defense on that back half. You're talking about players like Corey Enright, your who am I thinking of? I was going not Scarlett, but even like Lonergan. That's there we go. As I said, so yeah, exactly. I'm probably forgetting one, but so these are like some very big names. And, as I said, a part of the reason why the Cats haven't been, hit at floor ever in the last decade and a half is because, they're able to take players from other clubs and build on their strengths. Because obviously, Tuohy, while I said he had an All-Australian year in did you say 2016?
2012, I think he had an All-Australian year, but this is
no, it wouldn't be 20. That was his second year. I think that's meant to say 2022.
Okay, cool. that would make more sense.
That makes a lot more sense.
He was delisted in 2012, so it would have been one of the harsher delistings in football. But yeah, 2016, 20 disposal average, playing off that halfback line. I think that was his first All-Australian. And yeah, that obviously being traded. But yeah, as I said, he was still a fringy player at that time. As I said, he was just, he was one of the few shining lights for that Carlton backline at the time. Like I said, it would be him, Cade Simpson, and I think, the next best player would have been probably the tail end of Nick Dwegan, which is, a player. Oh, honestly, he might have been earlier. I just can't remember. But yeah, so they were playing like Kirsten Jacks that they had from GWS, and I think they may have just gotten Marchbank in at that time. So yeah. So I said, obviously, it's no disrespect for what he did at the Blues, because I said he started showing glimpses of that player, and then just to be so consistent afterwards, it's a real testament to him. And it's why he finished the game on 288 because he was so reliable.
Yeah,
288 games, of course.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Long career, massively long career for someone who was delisted as well at one stage in his career.
Delisted, basically a Cat B rookie. I think this was before that was introduced in the AFL. So yeah, it's just a bottom nothing pick that turned into serviceable for the Blues and absolutely terrific for the Cats.
100%. And therefore we salute him for we salute for his tenure to the AFL as a whole, for a thrilling career to watch, and we hope that he has a enjoyable retirement in whatever he does next. Whether he goes back to Ireland for a while, whether he stays here and does, lives out another career. I hope he does what is right for him and his family.
Yeah.
All right, next on our list is Trent McKenzie of Port Adelaide.
The Cannon. Yeah, so obviously, a bit of a interesting career. Obviously not quite to the same heights of the 288 games of Zac Tuohy. But, one of the initial, well, not drafts from the Suns, because he was part of the academy squad back in the day, rather the original lineup. And, very hyped young player, known, of course, for his booming kick. That's why we call him the Cannon. And played a somewhat mixed and serviceable role. I think he actually flirted in the forward line at times, but mainly played in defence. And yeah, for the Gold Coast, it was sort of, I think, reasonable. It's very hard to say because, it's very hard to judge.
You can't really judge inaugural Gold Coast players too harshly.
Yeah, exactly. Especially because, as I said, like Suns have had some good years, but they've never really had a really good defense. You know what I mean?
No.
But Trent McKenzie, I said, it's one of those things where I think he was like, just decent for the Suns. And then, looked to change his fortunes, started fall out of favour in the squad. I think that was probably the shift from McKenna to Rocket Eade, because 2016 his game started to drop off.
That makes sense.
And then unfortunately gets traded to the Power and suffers some cruel injury knocks. I think 2 knee injuries over 2 years. Played 1 game each for those 2 seasons.
Yeah, 2018, 2019.
Yep. And, it was just, it was like, oh, we didn't pay much for him, but it's a bit of a shame, but we're probably not going to see him again. And then 2020, a year out of nowhere. And, I said 17 games, still suffered a few injuries. But, it's probably a good storm for him because obviously with the shortened games, probably made it easier for him to come back. But, he played a really solid role when we were sort of shifting in defense. We traded off a few of our players. We started to shy away from people like Calhoun. I'm going back a bit here. Who was the other one we traded to the Gold Coast? I can't remember.
I don't know.
But yeah, there's various other. Dougal Howard, Riley Bonner.
Didn't both of them end up in St Kilda anyway?
Dougal Howard and Riley Bonner did, yeah. We did another one too as well. But yeah, as I said, we were just shelling taller halfbacks because we found ourselves being too tall, and it's amazing that a slower halfback ended up being a pretty decent addition to 2 finals campaigns. Came back to feature a bit in the last 2 years, 2023 and 2022. But yeah, we started to move away from him a bit. But yeah, honestly, for depth, also for the Port Magpies, I've heard he's, done a lot of work with them in development as well for some of the defenders. I think he may have worked a bit closely with Tyson Goldsack by memory as well, who's our defensive coach in the main league. And yeah, as I said, so, it's quite the lesser career, as less as 160 5 games can be, you know what I mean? But yeah, no doubt. Like, as I said, I think Port Adelaide will really appreciate what he's been able to provide to the club, coming from that adversity of 2 pretty cruel knee injuries, where, yeah, I said I, for all money, thought he was just done at that point. I didn't think we were going to see Trent McKenzie again. And, especially after, in that context, we also got Jack Watts in that period, who, sort of the same thing, did his knee, never came back. So yeah, as I said, for him to come back, work out, yeah, really good. I've always appreciated him. I thought he was honestly going to play this year because I didn't think Zach Thatcher was going to be as, he's still a flawed player, but as reasonable as he was. So.
As serviceable as he ended up being.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to mention Trent McKenzie's honours, because he does actually have a couple. He made the AFL Players Association 22 under 22 in 2013 and 2014. He was nominated for the Rising Star in round 17 of 2011. He won the club's Coaches Award in 2020 and the Max Porter Memorial Trophy in the Sandful for the most consistent player in 2019.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
But I think it's
certainly not as illustrious as Zac Tuohy, but it's definitely a very serviceable career, and he's more than done his job at both of the clubs that he's played at, really.
Absolutely. Even though,
even with injury woes.
That too, and also just Gold Coast being Gold Coast.
Yeah, I can't. Gold Coast had no defensive structure for honestly, the first 10 years of their existence.
So he was there during that 2014 season for the Gold Coast. Was it 2014 or was it the 2015?
With Ablett when he got injured?
Ablett that got injured. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to recall the season, but I believe it was the 2014 season.
I think it's 2014.
And they started off the season really, really well, and then Ablett got injured and club momentum stopped and they fell off. They just
Richmond had the exact same thing happen to them about 10 years earlier. Halfway through the season, Nathan Brown did both of his legs, and we hadn't been, and just derailed our entire season. Good old 2005.
Yeah. Honestly, look, I wasn't big into stats back then, so maybe I'm being a bit harsh to that Gold Coast defense, but by my memory, I remember they were definitely more just a bit more glass cannon offense sort of style team.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you had all of that young talent, but there's just no real sort of proper direction back then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good players.
Just to back up your point there, Cyric, as well, just looking at the table from 2014, the Suns scored just under 2,000 points for them. They had 2,045 scored against them. They had the most points scored for any team under 10th place in that season.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting.
But they also were very high up in the fact that they had points scored against them. Only teams. Yeah, it was not great.
Not a pretty side.
Yeah, honestly, by my memory, they had a lot of. It was a very mix of young players that never really developed. I can't even remember the name, and a few fringier players. They might have had Harbrow still, maybe even. Oh, would they have had Riscatelli? I'm not sure.
I think Riscatelli's been around a long time now.
Would they have had Carmichael then?
Carmichael Hunt was that era, yes.
Hunt was 3 years, I think. 3 or 4? Yeah. I can't remember.
God.
That period of
fever
time.
dream.
What a time to be alive.
I know.
But just circling back to Trent McKenzie, thank you for your service. We salute you as well. There is one more person that I do want to touch on. It's not an official retirement. It was technically delisted. But that's Gary Rowan. It was delisted last night or this morning by Geelong alongside Brandon Parfitt. Brandon Parfitt has a slightly better chance of still making an AFL career, being that he's only 26. But I want to touch on Gary Rowan because he's 33. He had that nasty head injury, which is probably why he was delisted. There's no official announcement on a retirement, but I just want to touch on his career in case we don't see him again in the AFL sphere. So, you know, it's incredible how his career has actually gone, considering, you know, he started at Sydney, even though he was actually in his under-18s career, he started at Geelong and then got recruited to Sydney, played in many finals, a couple of grand finals in there, won a couple of them as well. And then he, was recruited to Geelong, managed to coax his way back into Victoria, won a 2022 premiership, and overall, like, it's had a pretty impressive season. Impressive
Did he win
career.
A couple of grand finals?
I'm pretty sure he was.
I'm not sure if he was in 2013.
He was definitely in the 2022 grand final.
Yes, I know that.
Oh yeah, we know that.
But yeah,
I'm not sure
whether he was in 2013.
I'm gonna look it up.
Well, he was drafted in 2009, so I know at least he's been like around that.
He didn't start off that crush shot.
Yeah, I know, but it's like I'm pretty sure he was like in probably a fringe player for the 2013. I can't remember who was actually in the grand final.
Oh, sorry, it would be 2012.
Sorry, 13, 14, 15 with Hawthorn.
Yeah,
that's right. But yeah, I know he played. I'm pretty sure he played 2016 grand final. I think he played one of the ones against Hawthorn as well. But I can't remember much else.
No, he didn't. It was Lewis Jetta on the wing at that point for Sydney.
That's right. But yeah, just like looking overall at his stats and his career path, it is very impressive for someone who's like was a fringe player for a long time. And then got
like honestly like
injury.
Yeah, and it's one of the things where it's like it's been around for ages, but it's only had 1 year over 20 games. You know, so and a lot of that's just due to minor injuries. You know, I think it was a bit too fast for his own good. I mean, you know, sometimes you can't have the hamstring to support yourself, considering how much he's like to sprint off. But,
beyond pressure.
You know, I think the minor story about him as well. You know, it was always consistency for the Swans. You know, he'll chase signs and then sort of fade out of games. And then, you know, he would have some really good regular seasons with the Cats and, you know, sort of disappear in finals when I think they famously went out in straight sets 2 years. Or was it 1 year and, you know, other disappointing one?
I can tell you it definitely wasn't 2020 because that was the grand final. It might have been 2019. I don't remember if they made it the prelim 2019.
Yeah, I think they bowed out, and it's like one of those years Gary Rowan had like 5 disposals for the 2 games. And then, you know, obviously he had a much better campaign in their premiership year. So, Absolutely. You know, a nice little redeem story for him. He's someone who's always trying. Very fun to watch. Honestly, from some of the stuff he did, a bit underrated because, you know, he started off as a bit of a bowl burner, but then he actually very much improved in that regard. In terms of, you know, finding plays in sub 50 again, a bit more involved in the score involvements. And, you know, I said, won't go down as like the best winger in history, especially for his high draft pick, number 6 in the 2009 draft. But honestly, you sort of take that sort of career. You know, football's a hard sport. And yeah, as I said, he's had influence in the finals campaign. He's been serviceable for premiership squads. You know, it's it's a very solid after he finally got his career going in about, you know, mid 2010s, however you describe that period.
Something like that. But yeah, so like again, it's unconfirmed whether he's going to actually retire. It's his age that's mostly the factor. Though I feel like he could. There's at least a couple teams that could use the veteran experience, even if it's only for a year.
Yeah, it's sort of hard to see, but you know,
I'll say I don't really many teams that I can think of that would need a key forward like Gary Rowan at the moment with his age.
It wouldn't be like a full time. Like he probably wouldn't be playing full time. He'd be like play maybe.
Oh yeah, you could have like a development sort of.
Yeah, it was kind of like a Luke Hodge or like a Sam Mitchell, and Sam Mitchell went to West Coast, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I was gonna say, yeah, probably bought Jordan Lewis. I think Luke Hodge actually did.
Melbourne, yeah.
Of all the ones, Luke
maybe
Hodge has
St Kilda.
Not a bad shout, actually.
I'm just thinking, just because I don't think Max King is. I mean, this is a complete tangent itself, but I don't think Max King really is the best key forward for St Kilda, and I think
he's not even the best King. His brother's better than him.
Yeah,
I think maybe St Kilda could utilize him in some way if they're looking for more of a developmental role.
Yeah, exactly. And even if you do play him, like as you say, more as a forward, then because obviously his wing days are pretty much over. He's lost that speed.
No one's legs at that age can keep up.
Yeah, but as I said, he's still a bit of pace. You can, especially with King, get those leading patterns to draw defenders away from him. Because he's not the best pack mark as we've seen. If you can give him at least an option to mark the ball better, that might be where you see a player like Rowan being played. But his head needs to heal. If you've seen the picture of his massive stitching on his head,
it's not a pretty sight.
Was, I mean, no, that's definitely true.
But let's hope we see him for at least one more year if he's able to recover fully, still at least be somewhat AFL fit, because we know he can play. It's just the risk of the injury is the big factor for him. And if we don't,
it's one of those things.
Obviously,
no obligations.
Yeah,
we just love you, Gary.
We if this is it, he shows up at the AFL Grand Final retiring motorcade, then we thank you for a fun career to watch, and we salute you as well. All right, let's move on to the big news of the week: the Brownlow medal, and is it rigged? Because I mean, I in terms of the top three, I think the top three, at least the top two, is reasonable. Like everyone pretty much expected Cripps and Dacos to be up there. Like I have no issues with that. I assume most people wouldn't have any issues with that. But there are so many players that I feel like the big one, and especially the one that Sark and I want to talk about, is Bontempelli. Where is he?
Where is he?
That's all I want to know.
Snapping up all his votes.
It's absolutely wild, isn't it? That he's not
even in the top 10 is crazy. And that's not to say that any of the players in the top 10 had worse years, because they're all incredible. It's and you look at Heaney and Golden as well, and then Warner, who's 11th. It's they're all stealing votes off of each other, and they all basically made top 10, which is insane to see, because of how well Sydney's season was.
Yeah.
But it's there were matches. There were matches where Bont won games off his own boot, the same way Cripps did, but he barely got votes for them.
Yeah.
And it's so weird because, again, it's sort of that player like Petrarca who, as I said, the impact
who was probably really well up until his injury, surprisingly.
Oh yeah, Petrarca was. But you know what I mean? It's it's one of those ones where, as I said, he just doesn't have that Brownlow quote-unquote play style. Even though, as I said, you watch a game and you see Bontempelli's dominance. But, he dominates with, that 25 disposals. Sometimes he'll knock a 30 every now and then just to show off. You know what I mean? But then you got the few games where Bevo's our forwards are doing pretty crap. Bont, can you go, solve that? And he, trudges off to the forward line. Oh, I don't want to, but I'll still kick 2 goals.
What's more impressive
you know what I mean?
In the Brownlow list is that out of the top 15, only one player was ineligible. Which normally that's not that common. Normally it's 3 or 4, one of them being Toby Green.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Toby Green was not going to be up there after this season. Not even close. But
no.
Anyway.
No. Reserves. Useful, but definitely not his best by far.
No. But on Bontempelli, you're 100% correct. Bontempelli is one of those players who he just kind of does the dirty work. He does the grunt work of the team. But it doesn't ever seem to be noticed all that much during the Brownlow votes. Whereas us as an audience at home see it constantly. And even on, like, you'll go and watch different talk shows and things like that, and they'll commonly refer to Bontempelli as the greatest in the game, or, you know, one of the greatest in the game.
Well, you look at Sarek and I touched on this a couple of weeks back when during the buy round, when all of the other awards were announced, like MVP, coaches MVP, stuff like that, and Bontempelli was leading or won like a few of those, so it's very obvious that everyone else recognizes him. So why don't the umpires recognize him?
Well, that's the thing. It's like, and I think this was referring back to like that style, and it's why I had because I put a prediction up, which, you know, I didn't think they were that bad, but like they needed a scaling for this sort of Brownlow measure, because I had Nick Dacos winning it at 30. What did I say? 32.
I think he said 32. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was like, you know what? I don't think he had the best season. Like of the elite midfielders. Like, again, I'm not knocking Nick Dacos because he had a pretty great year, but like his worst periods, he was still getting like 32, 33 disposals. It's just umpires have a hard time rating the effect of disposals. So, you know, disposal efficiency tends to get underrated. Scoring involvements tend to get underrated because obviously once a pass is gone, like the umpire's not thinking, is it going to hit a target? They're thinking, is the defender holding on? Is there, you know, what do I have to look at in this one-on-one contest? So, you know, as I said, so that's just what makes it a bit silly. But, you know, obviously, you know, with Cripps, you know, I thought he was going to get votes, but it was just amazing with Carlton's back half of the season. And, you know, in their losses, how many times he got 3 votes. And, you know, I just couldn't predict that. And, you know, I said, I think he deserves to be. I think, you know, if you told me, oh, I think Patrick Cripps had the best season, like, no arguments for me. Like,
no, especially in the second half. Like, his second half was incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, how do you predict Brownlow votes? Because, you know, as I said, like, I know sometimes it can go a bit crazy and, like, you get, like, very weird microcosms of, like, stupidness or, you know, but, like, they tend to go over the radar. Normally, it, like, affects, you know, your small players. Like, you know, I mentioned before, like, you know, is the fact that, who was it? Against Fremantle, GWS, what's his name? That small kid.
Bedford, Tom Green.
No.
Brent Daniels.
Forward. Brent Daniels. Absolutely carved up Freo.
Yeah, 29 disposals or something like that. 2 goals.
Yeah, but
if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and he's one of the few players, and I shared this, champion data ratings, given assigned value after each match. Basically, if you've had a 30 match, you're probably in contentions to have the best match of that round. And, you know, Brent Daniels did that, and he was one of the few players to do that while not polling any Brownlow votes because, you know, Tom Green had a reasonable 40 disposal game, and so did Andy Brayshaw. You know, like, as I said,
you know what's really funny? For that game, Jesse Hogan got the 3 votes. So it was Jesse Hogan got the 3, Brayshaw got 2, Tom Green got 1.
Yeah, and it's like, I can understand that Jesse Hogan, like 6'4", like, you know, if you're just an umpire, like, that's easy to remember. But you know what I mean? It's just like...
As much as that was probably one of Hogan's best games he's ever played, I also don't think that he probably should have gotten the 3 votes just in general. I think he probably should have gotten 2. Tom Green, sure, he can still get the 1. But yeah, Brent Daniels probably should have gotten the 3.
Yeah. I mean, look, like I said, it doesn't bother me, but, you know, it's just what I mean by, like, there's so many quirks because of the fact that we have umpires doing it, and I think it's just something you accept. Like, I said for years now, like, AFL Coaches Association has generally been the better gauge of it. On the flip side, you have people like Gary Ablett just dominating that for, like, he won it like
3 or 4 times.
I think it was 4 in a 7-year period, which is insane.
I mean, which, you know, at the time makes a lot of sense. He was one of the best players in the game.
But, there's a lot more to normalize it. Obviously, having 5 instead of 3, the biggest problem with the Brownlow is that the worst player and the 4th worst player are rated the same. You know what I mean? So, at least 5 get a bit more. You've got 2 coaches, which is, covering it from oversights or maybe even some personal biases. So that's why I rank it. I like the Brownlow being jank, but yeah, this season it was definitely probably a bit too much jank. But unfortunately, it'll take away from a pretty decent win from Patrick Cripps. I think it's just many people. It's just like, how ridiculous 45 votes is because it's like what almost 10 more than Dustin Martin's 2017, which is if you're gonna ask someone who the best year was, individually. There'll be others that are up there, but like most people are going to go to that. You look
at the games that Cripps got didn't get votes in. 2 of them were bye rounds. One was opening round, which Carlton didn't play. We have many opinions on that already. And then it was round 5, round 8, round 10, 20, and 22. Which he only polled 1 vote in 1 round. Everything else was a 2 or 3.
Yeah, and as I said, it's like, Carlton won, what was it? 3, no, not even 2 of the last 7 games. And his, all 3 in and it's like end of the year 2-3-0-3-0-3-3. That's just. I don't think, that losers should be ruled out of it or whatever. It's just, you know what I mean? It's just so unusual, because normally it's the opposite. Normally, I think they sometimes go too much towards the team that won. But randomly, Storm in the teacup, Patrick Cripps tends to be a very good player in a loss because he tends to bury his head down more. Obviously, the other midfielders have had a bit more up and down years, especially in polling wise. Because obviously Sam Walsh, still very talented, but he definitely didn't have a.
He also missed a lot of games in the first half, so that wouldn't help him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like a lot of the time, the Carlton's best players were tall forwards, and they just don't really get votes unless they have 5+ bad games. Yeah. So.
Yeah,
I did just have a look as well there, Cyric, just to see the games that they won. The games that Carlton won in the back half of the season were Richmond and North Melbourne. Every other game they lost, and they lost fairly comfortably in as well. Except for that
exactly.
Obviously at the very end of the season.
Yeah, apart from the Freo and Port game? Freo and...
It was the game that they lost. Oh, they got close against Collingwood.
23 and 24 is what I'm more looking at because they were the 2 games that they needed.
23, 23 they smashed the Eagles.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then they lost to St Kilda by 2 in.
Oh yeah, that's right. And then
24.
You, Cyric, were at the Freo Port game. And you got to look in.
I heard that result.
We spoke about this. The whole crowd was up in arms with that game.
The stadium let me know, yeah. So, obviously I still have fond memories of that. But, yeah, I mean, look, there's no doubt. Round 23, Patrick Cripps, it might have been one of the better individual performances. But you know what? Sometimes, champion data doesn't say anything. Because even that was that was just a 23. So, as I said, I think it's one of the things where people just get a bit picky and choosy. Even myself sometimes, it's oh, well, he had decent stats that game, he should have got 3 votes. And then sometimes you get someone 3 votes with, like a Tom Green, 40, but a bit less impact. And it's oh, well, as I said, he needed to get more score involvements. And then you get a lower one winning and, the circle repeats. And it's just however you think votes should go at the time. There's no consistency unless you want to do it yourself, which I can't be bothered doing. So you know what I mean? I think it's just you got to accept it. It's just I would like to see the shift away from umpires doing it. I think it should be done by an independent panel. Unless you're going to pay umpires more to watch it after the match, But
I wouldn't be opposed. I definitely agree on the side of an independent panel, but I don't think it should be made up of media or former players. I think it needs to be a separate group altogether, maybe somewhat disconnected from the AFL themselves. Maybe they have an understanding of the game, but don't really have a bias towards a specific team, which is going to be really hard to find because most of the country either follows the AFL or the NRL.
Honestly, I don't think media's ever been that bad, like, especially if they're forced to actually watch the games. But yeah, as I said, it's more just...
The only issue I have with media is that they always try and craft a storyline, because that's how media functions.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's always that hard thing where, like, the neutrals, like... I think you still got an understanding of impact, because otherwise that just shifts again to whoever gets the most disposals, you know what I mean? So, it's definitely a fine balance, but yeah, as I said, personally, I don't really care. Like, I don't rate the Brownlow that highly. I would respect those people that win it. But you know, it's like, you know, back in 2020 when Ollie Wines won it. It's like, yeah, I know that Ollie Wines wasn't the best player that year, but I'm still happy we won a Brownlow.
It's like last year when Lachie Neale won it. Like, everyone knows that he was not the best player that season, but he still got it.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's just a way to celebrate players. It's janky. But yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's the media that just harp on about it. Like, people getting X amount of Brownlows or X amount of All-Australians, and it's like, you know, but every year we complain about the All-Australian, and every year we complain about...
Hey, we complained about it this season with Max Gawn. Where is my Tristan Sherry?
Oh,
yeah,
so
well...
I was actually going to ask the question, is there a player that didn't get a lot of votes that you think should have gotten more votes? Or vice
Other
versa?
than Bontempelli?
Other than Bontempelli, because I think we're all very clear on the Bontempelli angle.
Let me just have a look at the top 30, because I haven't really had a proper look. I think Zach Merritt probably should have gotten more.
Yeah.
We both kind of had Zach Merritt polling pretty high, because apart from, you know, Essendon's disappointing season, he's easily their best player.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, like, I expect him to be low 20s. I'm not sure what he got in the end. I think it was like 17.
Yeah, he got
18 in the end. He polled the same amount of votes as Luke Davis-Uniacke,
Jordan who actually had a decent season.
And
and Allied captain Jordan Dawson.
Yeah, LDU had a good season.
I mean, it depends where you count as unders, because, you know, it's like, I'd say a player like Ed Richards, maybe, you know, he deserves a bit more.
Yeah, but he also missed a lot of footy as well.
Oh, I know that, but you know what I mean? It's like, but he's not designed for Brownlow voting. You know what I mean? Like, A is in the Bulldogs, and B, you know, as I said, he just plays that more outside game, which means you're not allowed votes. Max Holmes is another one. Definitely should have got more than 10.
Yep, I agree.
Or just Geelong. Geelong got absolutely shoved.
Yeah.
The AFL was just like, we don't like how you play.
As much as
midfielders, no votes.
As much as I think Jeremy Cameron
had Geelong player was Cameron,
Yeah, like as much as he had a great season, and I think he is probably one of the best full forwards in the game right now. It was definitely not Geelong's best player that should have been polling for Brownlow votes.
No, like 16 was probably about bang on. It's just I would have expected Max Holmes to be again fringing 20 if you on like pure influence of the game, being around the best top 3 players. Like Max Holmes would have had a few games where, you know, he was off the halfback getting 25 possessions and like, you know, 3 or 4 score involvements average per game. And, you know, but again, they don't tend to rate that run and carry off halfback. But on the flip side, it means other players like Nick Martin and, you know, Jake Lloyd and other more, or Lockie Whitfield even, you know. Who's the other one I'm thinking of?
So one of the
Flanders.
That's who I was going to say. I was really surprised that Flanders only managed to poll 12 votes. Like, Flanders polled worse than James Worpel, who had a good season, don't get me wrong, but I didn't think that Worpel had a better season than Flanders, because even when Gold Coast looked bad, and they looked bad in some of their games, Flanders always looked really quite good.
Yeah, it's weird, because, like, me and Blazer discussed this, like, you know, Gold Coast have the problem with some of their chip players, and I would put Flanders in those too, but I've never really had a problem with how Flanders actually plays. It's more like the system. Like, Flanders is good for a chip player, you know what I mean? And like, he had a pretty great season, still got involved in a lot of attack. Yeah, as I said, it's just like, you know, one of those things where That style. You can be chippy in the midfield. You just can't be chippy in halfback.
One player
until you make the center square, you're not allowed to just rack up cheap disposals.
One player that I think should have pulled a little bit higher is Bailey Dale as well. I think he had a really, really underrated season. Granted, a lot of the votes would have been stolen from, like Liver, who only got one more than him, and Bontempelli and Treloar. But I definitely think he should have been a little bit more recognised.
Yeah, no, totally. But
yeah, I don't think
I can't off the top of my head. I think most of the players that polled well were like your typical Brownlow players, and as I said,
absolutely.
Like Tom Green. I don't want to pick on him because I still think he's a great player, but a lot of the times he has a bit more disposal than impact. I would still put him like just below elite midfielder tier if you're like ranking all the midfielders. He's just, as I said, he has a game that's like pretty much designed for racking up Brownlow votes. Whereas like someone like Matt Rowell, I'd probably argue had a more solid year in terms of overall contribution.
I definitely think Matt Rowell is pretty much in the right spot of his career where he could sneak up on like an actual top 5 sitting for a Brownlow. Didn't he make top 5 last season? I can't remember. I know he's been top 5, I think, once.
I think so. Because it was like top 5 last year were dominated by young people. So it might have been Rowley.
But yeah, like overall, like we can't knock the seasons that the top 10 have had, especially Newcombe. When Newcombe had to step up massively when Day came in and then immediately got injured again. But it's like, it feels weird that some of the votes went to players that probably shouldn't have got it, but it is what it is otherwise.
Yeah. What's funny is like sometimes it's just because I thought Zach Butters who got third. Like I didn't actually think he had that consistent back half a year.
No, definitely.
And he almost pulled perfect for a lot of them. And I'm just like, okay, sure.
I had Butters on my fantasy team as a little spoiler, and his back half of the year compared to his front half of the year was such a disappointment for me that I almost considered just benching him outright for the half of the season.
So I said I just don't know. Again, I think it's just the way Port plays. A lot of, like I said, like Houston really should have been getting some of those free votes instead of Butters. But he didn't poll well at all. But again, it's just like a player that I don't expect to poll well because, again, like I said, I'd say Houston's a bit more skilled than the other halfbacks that I mentioned. But you know what? It's just how the Brownlow works.
All right. Last thing we want to touch on before we jump into the prelims is Mark of the Year and Goal of the Year. I know a lot of people have pretty much agreed that both of them were terrible, and there were definitely so many better options throughout the season. Jamie Elliott's on Ben, last name blanking, Ben Mackay. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
It was probably should have been it because I think that was probably the best one of the season, at least in my opinion. Harley Reid's goal was kind of a nothing goal, I'll be honest. It shows, that he's a decent midfielder at the moment, but it's like, not much more to it. He was being chased by Petrarca of all players.
Yeah. No, it's definitely one of those things where it's like, it's a nice goal in context. It's not that easy to do, but like the shot itself is so simple for players in this league. Like they practice running shots from the center square like all day in training. Like that's just not bread and butter, but you know what I mean? Like something that they want going through about 60% of the time. Like by gold standard, that's just stock standard.
Yeah.
But as I said, it depends because you never want it to be like, for instance, say, and this is an extreme example, Buddy Franklin's on the wing. Like, obviously, like that was still a fantastic goal from where he kicked it. Like it's still a high degree of difficulty, one of the best goals of all time. But you know what I mean? You have to include a lot of that run as well. So it's like, you want that to be balanced.
Or it's like
that.
But
this just wasn't it.
It's like the pocket goal from a couple of weeks ago from Jeremy Cameron. Like, I feel like that should have been a massive contender as well, but it's...
Oh, obviously it can't in the way that the rules are.
Oh, yeah.
Set, but
Speaking of rules that are set, do they really need a mark of the finals and a goal of the finals, or do they just let the whole thing collapse in as just one still category?
Just include it. Just include it into the regular mark of the year and goal of the year, because the year is still going as long as the final season is still going.
Yeah.
In my opinion, and it shouldn't be, because who was it that took that mark against GWS? Heaney. Yeah. That would any day of the week blow any of those marks of the year contenders out of the water. I think. Yeah. I think if that goes into mark of the year, it's the easy win.
The only other one I think would have probably should have contested that would have been Jamie Elliott's, purely because Jamie Elliott's landing was a lot more impressive. Because considering if it wasn't for, I can't remember the player's name.
He had to get help down from Callahan.
Yeah, that's right.
Buckley, sorry, you're right.
Yeah, because if he didn't land properly, it would have been a lot worse than landing flat on his back. But yeah, because Elliott just landed on his feet, despite being super high in the air, and that's hard enough to land as it is. So that's probably would have been the 1-to-1 contender. In terms of goal of the year, that's not really something I keep track of throughout the year, because there's just so many kicked, you can't really keep an eye on all of them.
Especially with boundary side goals, really being a practice skill now. It used to be so rare to get those snaps from the boundaries and all that, but nowadays it's just you expect one per week. But it's still some that were impressive. Obviously Jack Higgins was the one that people were saying should have been up there. What was it? Was it in that last round against Carlton?
Yes, it was in the last round against Carlton when he kicked it over his head. Was the last goal that sealed the game for them.
Yeah. So, no, not that one. There was a boundary side kick. It might not have been that one.
No, it wasn't the same game, but I do remember he's done a lot of those throughout his career already.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what I mean. But I will say this in terms of finals. I think one thing you're forgetting is that normally a lot of the prize and a lot of the promotion is because it's done by an advertising company, Virgin. Obviously having it this year, and it's been other cars as well and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So I'm just reading through
the thing why it can't happen is because it wants it to be announced in a televised event. The only televised event around that time is the Brownlow. So therefore you would at least be ruling out the grand final, which makes it a bit awkward. So they just make it regular season. If you didn't have that, I would agree, do it afterwards. I just can't see it happening.
I do understand why it's not done afterwards, because all the players don't want to think about the AFL after grand finals is over. They want to go on their holidays. They want to do whatever they want. The only other thing that we think about is players who are looking for trades or have been delisted, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But everyone else just they stop care at that. They don't care at that point.
Yeah. But as I said, I think it's more the sponsor, because that would mean that the AFL are thinking about players over money, which I don't think happens that often.
Yeah, because I'm just looking at the article, and Brad Hill won $50,000 and 2 million velocity points.
Yeah, exactly.
I would like both. Thank you very much.
It's he already gets close enough to the sky off his own feet. Why does he need that extra help?
The players already get so many velocity points anyway because of how many flights they catch throughout the year, especially the players in WA.
I don't know about that. Do they actually get velocity points?
We get our 16 first class tickets.
Because even though I'm pretty sure team manager and whatever book the flights themselves, I'm pretty sure each player does actually have their own still velocity account, or at least it's divvied up afterwards, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. You would hope so.
Yeah.
But yeah, there isn't really much more to say on goal of the year and mark of the year. It's just,
I think out of the options that were there, the goal of the year, I think, was fine for, the options that we were given.
Well, yeah, it was either Harley Reid or Nick Dacos, and I don't really want to give it to Nick Dacos.
No. It's not even because I don't like Nick Dacos. I think he's a great player, but just both of the goals were just, they seem fairly standard. It just seemed like fairly standard effort to come through from a player of Nick Dacos' caliber. We should expect that from him.
And it's there's other teams that have had that goal. Jason Horn-Francis has kicked that sort of goal like, 2 or 3 times this year. And I'm sure if I was following other clubs, I would be able to say a few more. But
Heaney kicked a couple like that. Warner kicked a couple.
Yeah,
like
exactly. Warner, yeah, he would be one.
I think
Warner kicked one against Port, I'm pretty sure.
Luke Ryan kicked a goal from the boundary line against, I believe it was Collingwood, to get a draw against them.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Back in round...
It was
12?
super early.
Yeah, it would have been like 10, maybe a bit earlier.
Like,
nice.
that's more impressive to me than Nick Dacos kicking a running goal.
Yeah, context never gets into it, because there's been some other ones, like, there was the one where Bontempelli, in his debut year, kicked the winning goal against Melbourne, like, kicking over his head in a scrum pack, and that didn't win, so...
That's the other goal, actually. The Bontempelli goal against Fremantle, where he took on 3 defenders at once, snapped around the corner, and kicked. That's the other goal that I think of as goal of the year.
Yeah, for sure, but that's whatever. As I said, it's basically just an award to create more advertising money for whatever company gets to own it.
Yeah, it's goal of the year. It's fine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if we're done rambling on that, since we do have a special guest and he is a GWS supporter, I figure we would let him rant for a bit about GWS's season, overall thoughts, what you want going into the next season. So feel free to start wherever you want.
All right. We'll start off with the start of the season and my expectations for it, because obviously we went in and the season before, the 2023 season, we had that kind of miracle run towards the end where we gained so much momentum. We made it all the way and we were 1 point off of playing in the grand final against Brisbane. Going into this year, my expectations were we should at least be winning a final. Like, we should be winning at least one final going into this season. Anything less than that should be considered a failure with the list that we had and the momentum that we had going forward as well.
Yeah.
And then we got into the season. We started off well. We beat Collingwood, and obviously Collingwood were in their slump, and obviously it turned out Collingwood weren't that good a team. But things looked really optimistic at the start, and then we just plummeted. And I've always called GWS this, like, roller coaster of a team to support, and that you can never get high expectations with GWS, because the second that you do, the second that you get your hopes up, that you're like, yeah, we're on a roll, we're making it, this is our year, baby, it just plummets.
You sound like a St Kilda supporter.
And
St Kilda don't get that high Blaze.
They did last year. They had to face the Giants in a final.
Yeah. To be fair,
but no one believed in St Kilda.
I thought St Kilda were a fraud team in the finals last year.
Yeah, no, they were. I had a mini watch party here for it, and yeah, it didn't go very well.
No, I can imagine it didn't. But yeah, I always thought they were a fraud team, and I didn't think they'd make the 8 this year. But GWS, I really expected to finish in the top 4, which thankfully we did, even though it looked like we weren't going to at multiple points in the season. When we were going into this final season, though, into this final series, I thought we had a fair amount of momentum. But looking back on it, we didn't really beat any top 8 teams. Like, we beat Fremantle when they were top 8, but that's Fremantle when they were going all the way down. I think the only other top 8 team that we beat was potentially Port, I want to say.
You did beat us. It was a bit before your run. Hawthorn was the team that you beat.
Hawthorn was the other
a couple of weeks.
Yes.
You broke their because they would have had an unbroken run into the finals.
Was that the game? Was that the game in Canberra?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It was.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, we won a game in Canberra. Absolutely phenomenal. That's the other thing that I'll talk about later. But I don't know. It just seemed like throughout points, GWS's the star players for GWS just seemed to stop playing for success and start playing for their own games. And it just didn't bode well for the team. We seemed to lose what was making us a threat at the end of last year. Our running gun style, our carry through the midfield just wasn't there. We were a lot slower paced. A lot of our forward line was good. Like, Jesse Hogan was good. But then you have Toby Green, who's underperforming. We were playing Callum Brown for 3/4 of the season, and I think he had one good game, and it was opening round.
Yeah, that's about right.
You know, obviously we had some really big shining stars. Like, we had Brent Daniels, who had a great season. Kelly had a really good season as well.
I was very impressed with Darcy Jones when he started getting consistent games.
When he came in,
he looked really good, and he looks like he'll be a really good talent. Peatling had a good season as well.
Yeah, definitely on that back half.
But then you have, and Bedford as well. But then you have players who normally you think are really consistent players who were having weirdly like quiet games. Like Whitfield had a couple of really quiet games in the middle of the year. Tom Green didn't have as good a performance as you'd expect. Obviously, Toby Green throughout the entire season, for me, really underperformed. He had a couple of good games, but when you compare that to the form of last year, where it looked like he could have been in contention for a Coleman medal at one point last year, to this year where he really just solidly underperformed, was missing easy shots all year, and was just not getting hold of the ball at all.
Mm-hmm.
It just was poor. And then you have our defense, which was good until we had an injury of Sam Taylor.
Yep.
And then when Sam Taylor gets injured and we have to rely on Harry Himmelberg to be our main and key defender, that's when things start to arise. And I think that Harry Himmelberg was a real weakness for us as well. I think that a lot of the good teams with really good forward lines were just exploiting Himmelberg and the fact that he would push up the ground a lot more, and they would just get in behind him, and it would be possibly the easiest matchup that some of their forward line opponents had against us as well. So overall for me, it was not the season that we wanted. Like I said, I think to call it a success, we needed to win a finals. And not doing that, and then not doing that in the fashion that we did as well, where we led in both finals by quite a margin to then choke it away. I made the joke before we came online, but we could choke on a piece of custard. Like, it genuinely, it was dreadful. And going into this next season, where we have a lot of players looking to go away from GWS now, and we haven't really got any news of any new players coming towards us at the moment, it's looking pretty dire at the moment for next season for GWS. I love my boys, but unless we see some really big step-ups from our veterans and from our more consistent players to stay consistent for the entire season, I think it's starting to look a bit rough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we like sort of well, as I said, I like to talk to things in terms of structure, but it does again come down to the players. Even a player I'd like to mention, like Stephen Caniglio. Obviously, I'm a big fan of him being a WA boy, but I think it's just, the sum of the parts. It's not just, it's Caniglio. It's the fact that you've got a midfield of Caniglio, Kelly being the best of what I'm about to say, Tom Green, is that they're not the best disposal unit. And one of the biggest problems for GWS is their midfield to forward line connection, especially from stoppages. It's one of the more poorer teams in the comp for that, especially of the top teams. And then, you've got the GWS Waves and people are harping on about it. But when you look at a few matches, and I think I covered a fair few of the back half matches, and that's why I think they had troubles putting the foot on the throat of a lot of teams, is because it was very stop-start, and you mentioned, part of their back line, I think their back three are fairly solid through most of the season. Obviously, a bit of depth trouble, but again, losing Sam Taylor, it's a big drop-off, It's a bit unfair to, purely put up on it.
He was pretty much rated as the best halfback at that time, or at least the best backman at that time. That was a massive disappointment for the entire team.
But, it's I'm not going to say Connor Iden, Lockie Ash, Whitfield especially, and it's what you said. It's you could take Iden and Ash, turning the ball over a bit. They're young kids. Well, I guess Iden you want to see.
To be fair, I love Iden. I think Iden.
I love Iden really too. Good. Like I said, run carry off halfback. But as I said, again, you got three people in the midfield that are not known for their possession quality. You got three people on the halfback line that's not known. And I think that just made a lot of stop-start chains for GWS. I think their biggest problem all year was, again, you would have these chains where it would go back from the back after the forward line. They'll get on the highlights and you say, wow, what a fun team GWS is to watch. And then, you would probably remember it, that terrible Port GWS game that was so many like chains of just stop start. No one could move the ball from half back into their forward line. And like that was as much as a representation of GWS movements as their best. It was just very dichotomous. And again, when it came to consistencies, unfortunately, when you have trouble moving the ball, especially with the league the way it is, this year especially, as I said, it just meant that they were chaseable because that sort of thing happened. And as you point out, like you can take it from some of the developing players, but I think the biggest disappointment was, still some of their core group of players that you really want to step up. And it wasn't all of them. I think Callum Ward, had a pretty fantastic year for his age.
So good. He's aging like fine wine, isn't he?
Yes,
this was his
Absolutely
best year.
beautiful.
This was his best year in quite a few years. And even last year was quite good. It was
exactly.
He stepped it up to a different level this year. And God, he looks handsome as well. Like I'm a Callum Wood simp, honestly.
Yeah.
I would thirst after him all day. But I 100% agree with you. I think we can take mistakes from our developing players, but when we've got our more experienced players, especially off of the halfback, we really need them to be hitting targets, and then our midfield to then be backing that up with hitting targets again. Because the best we looked was when Jesse Hogan would push up from the forward line to the midfield to link up with our midfield.
Exactly. And you can't rely on, Port's had that problem too with their forward line. It's like, either we're relying on Georgiades going wide, or we had the half alive Todd Marshall having to run up the field, and we couldn't even do that all year. So you know what I mean? It was just like, sometimes it's not just the quality of the forward line, because teams can do that. But it's how they connect together. And GWS, as much as their best, and again, like Port was the same. I think we talked about this I think it was just before the prelims, how I thought, like GWS and Port of the teams remaining were definitely the flakiest, I would have said. And as I said, I think right. Even though obviously Port had the victory over Hawthorn, that definitely got caught up. We'll talk about it in a bit with that. So, but as I said, it was just, it's just one of those things where it's so disappointing when there's a lot of things that were good about GWS this season, especially a lot of the younger players, that had years above expectations, like Jesse Hogan, especially. Like no one was thinking
what
he was
a revitalization.
What a
revitalization of a career.
He's had a couple of he's what? This is his fourth club?
Third club. Melbourne,
Freo, and GWS,
Yeah, and then had very middling seasons for multiple reasons, partially mental health, others were just bad form. To come to the GWS and the past 2-3 years he's been there, he's been incredible. You know what I mean? It's
I think it's 2. I'm pretty sure it's only 2.
It probably is true. But these 2 seasons alone has just completely revitalized his career. And granted, he when you look at him, at least through the camera lens, he doesn't look that tall for a tall forward. But he's just got great hands. He knows how to kick well, and surprisingly, he's been a pretty good leader down there as well.
Yeah, and he's been the best contested mark for the entire season. He just has been. I think statistically, he has been.
He's the best contested mark, I think. Full stop in forward 50.
Yes.
The only issue that I have with that is that we may become too reliant on him, and we kind of saw that a little bit especially in that second game against Brisbane, where we were trying to just go to him a lot towards the back end, because we were just trying to throw things at the wall to see what would stick. Because and that's the other thing with GWS, is that when it gets to the back half of games, they just seem to lose whatever composure they had. And
exactly.
They just go into panic mode. Like Brent Daniels kicking while the ball is 15 meters out and you've got the free kick to take an advantage for a behind. Like that, we go back, we kick a get shot, that seals the game. It's just little mistakes that get made in those moments as well for GWS that just, it's uncharacteristic of them when you see them play the rest of the game in such dominant fashion. to then suddenly look like a completely different team when a third quarter rolls around.
And look, as I said, we saw a few teams do this, but they're definitely a park the bus sort of team. Like, they will go a bit earlier into defensive mode, and I think Kingsley just needs to. Oh, it's very hard to do because, you know, as I said, part of it's just natural reactions of the player. I don't think there's any coach saying, you know, like 20 minutes, you know, 3-goal lead, do everything you can to stop it. No, that's just sort of the way it plays. And again, GWS with that broken transition, you know, if they don't trust their ball movement, they're more likely to take the safe options with their kicking. But as I said, it eventually turns into this mindset that we saw. And unfortunately, you know, I said, it happened in the worst possible way in the finals.
Yeah. Yeah, that is just bad. It was a good thing we didn't do a watch party for that one, Blaze, because you would have seen a broken man. You would have seen a very broken man.
I am very glad I had other things going on at the same time that we could not do that. What's the heavy? I want your opinion on Riccardi.
Ooh.
Because I don't rate him, I will be honest.
I think he's fine. I don't think he's great. I think he's just fine for the league. But for GWS, I don't know if he really fits in.
Yeah, because I look at that forward line. I look at Hogan, Green, and then with how average Callum Brown's been and how average Riccardi has been, you don't really have anything else up there at the moment. Like Brent Daniels, who, you know, pushes mid forward. Like, again, Toby Green also pushes mid-forward, but you don't really have the best options.
I think, what the decision has to be made... Oh, sorry.
So I was just thinking, we had Flynn going into the forward line a fair bit as well, but even he, like, his kicks on goal looked... Like, he never looked like he was going to kick a goal. Every time he walked forward to kick, it just seemed like he was going to miss whatever he was shooting at.
Like, especially, when Briggs essentially was like, I can be a workhorse ruckman. You don't need to worry about covering me. You know, he was just cast aside, essentially, for the back half of the season. I think he was actually shelved at around early. I think it would have been around 7 or 8, wouldn't it? That would have been the last game Flynn played this year?
Flynn played in the final series as well. Because he was the backup, backup ruckman, so he was taking some ruck time away, especially in those final series. But he was moving forward as well a fair bit. He was like providing that tall forward option. I think a lot of the time it was when we had why am I drawing a blank on his name? We were just talking about him. He won the Coleman Medal, for God's sake.
Oh, Hogan.
Hogan.
Thank you. I think he was also going forward a lot of the time when Hogan was on the bench resting. So he did definitely play. I do remember seeing him there.
That makes a lot
of
sense.
Are you sure you're not thinking about Lockie Keefe?
I could be thinking of Keith. You know what? Maybe I am thinking of Keith.
Lockie
Keith.
I'm
thinking of Keith. Because I remember him because in that first one against Sydney, he played about 50% as a backup ruck, and he actually did really good. A bit quieter against Brisbane, but I think Flynn left around round 5 this year. But you know what you said translates to
Keith anyway.
Keith, you know, so
it works.
What I will say, so I was trying to mention before, is I think the emergence of Riccardi in that last probably 5 rounds, I think there's just a decision to be made. Like, obviously, Riccardi was going to be who you probably think is going to be the second ruckman for a while. But, you know, it's that decision, like, do you... Like, I sort of always think, like, in tall forward theories, like, sometimes you can run 2 number 1 forward options, and that's just, you know, have 2 strong big bodies taking the main lead, and you just, you know, you have them run a bit separate, one on the left, one on the right, and you just, you know, the big body forward. But also you can have like a number 1 and a number 2 forward, where one comes a bit more up the ground, probably around that floating 50, and, you know, provides a bit more separation. They're not always the target, they're a bit more distribution. And that's where I think, like, sort of the problem comes with GWS is that they don't have a tall distributing forward. It's all just pure goal kickers that Again, because they're so young, not quite taking the marks yet. Cadman, I think, will be that player. Again, probably dual number ones.
I keep forgetting
with
about
Hogan.
Aaron Cadman. He's so good.
Yeah. And I said Riccardi, they're just not going to run 3 number ones. You just can't do that. He doesn't come up the ground. So either he's got to work on his distribution or, he's just going to be death player for next year, I think.
Yeah.
Same with Brown.
Unless if they can,
Brown probably can come up a bit more, but
unless they can find a new role for him, if he's willing to show that he could possibly be molded into a new role, like we've seen with Rory Lobb at the Doggies. Like maybe there's something there for him, unless he might just end up getting kind of forced out of that forward line altogether.
Well, they might look to put Backman back because they're obviously losing their back depth this year. Most likely, Perriman coming, both sort of getting lost. I mean, obviously coming, they've flirted with a wing before, but I said if they were to, I think they're just looking at sort of finding a new. They need to find some new depth because I think their best 22 next year will be fine. It's just as I said, it's always hard when you got like a lot of young, really good players. People think, oh, they'll be set for years, and then salary caps exist. At opportunity.
No, 100%. What I would like to see is I'd like to see Harry Himmelberg be reintroduced into the forward line at the moment.
Yeah,
I think that he's done a fine job as a defender because we needed a defender. But I think that if we want to be a top 4 side next year again, we need to get someone who's stronger than Himmelberg into the defense, into the defensive line, a natural defender. And then we can move Himmelberg back to the forward line where he's more comfortable. He's been more natural there. He's performed well there for us in the past as well. And it gives us at least something else in the forward line to kick to outside of Jesse Hogan, because otherwise it just doesn't seem like if it goes to anyone else other than Jesse Hogan, half the time I'm not convinced we're going to kick a goal.
Yeah,
that's very reasonable.
I will say, Toby McMullen coming in late into the season.
Oh yeah,
genuine surprise. Would love to see more of him next year as well.
We will note it down because there's a fair chance we'll talk about that sort of stuff in our off-season episodes as well. If there's anything else, we're all done ranting about TWS. Shall we rant about Port now and start on the prelims?
What are you going to rant about? It was a prelim finish.
You know what you have to rant about. You've got the first game anyway.
Okay, look, as I said, unfortunately, as good as the Hawthorn game was, you feel like you turn a bit of a corner. As much as things can turn for the best, sometimes they go back to the worst before you've really had time to think about it. Look, as I said, I'm not going to go too deeply into the way this match played out. Sort of a game to forget, really, like both as a neutral and a Port fan. I think Sydney fans would have been the only joyous party of this one. I will say, I think Port played solidly in the first quarter. I think they competed okay. But, it was very clear from the outset what was going wrong with Port. It wasn't the clearances, one contest possession. It was the way that they launched their attacks. And it was throughout the entire night with absolutely no change. It was attacking, launched high and long inside 50, ignoring most leading targets. It just made it so easy for Sydney to defend. Like, as I said, I think, and I've said this a few times, sometimes the best way to defeat Port is to let Port defeat themselves. And this was pretty much it. Like, as I said, Sydney just had to be accountable. They just had to wait for a lot of the 450 turnovers, there were a lot, unfortunately. Very as good as the back half was last week. Our halfbacks were pretty bad this week. As I said, so it was a bit of a shame there. So they just really played uncontested, pretty straightforward. They found leads when they wanted to. A lot of the tolls had a lot better games than really a lot of them have had. I think it's been the first time like Sydney's forward line, all their tolls have at least provided something since probably the first half of the year, really, and that wasn't even their MO.
Yeah, because we've talked all season long about, not all season long, but at least for the second half, that Sydney's midfielders are the one doing a lot of the heavy lifting up forward.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, as I said, so, it started off, okay, but as I said, to emphasize that point, Sydney ended up kicking 12-4, 76 from total turnovers. Their final score was 14-11, 95. So, you know what I mean? Like, and that's always the damning thing about turnovers is like, you can go, oh, teams can be accurate and inaccurate, but a lot of the times when teams are accurate is because they've had some avenue to easy options, and turnover is a great way to get those easy goals. Unfortunately, it means that Port tend to allow teams to score easily against them, even though I don't think their defense themselves were that bad. Like, Zac Thatcher had a pretty bad game, I'm not going to lie. Aaliyah, I thought was pretty great. Like, Sydney did some things to curb that. They put Luke Parker on him, got him to lead wide, drew him away from the contest. That worked well, but Aaliyah still had a good game, I thought. And yeah, but as I said, they isolated him, which meant, yeah, as I said, Zac Thatcher was often caught out. And sometimes Bergman. I still think Bergman had an okay game, but like definitely reasonably dealt with. But you compare it to Sydney's backline, Nick Blakey, Dane Rampy, Jake Lloyd. I know Lloyd's not playing defense; he was a bit more on the wing. But like in terms of that defensive to offensive transition, they were far better. Rebuffed a lot of Port entries, and in terms of Port's own attack, it would have. Sydney could play the game so slowly because Port needed the game to go as long as the Le Mans. To get to 95 points themselves. They were just not going to do it. Like, as I said, probably there was a point in the second quarter where Sydney scored a few turnover goals and the game was done pretty much by then. It just didn't seem like Port were going to get there. Port had a few junk time performances. And yeah, as I said, Sydney just looked solid. Like, it's going to be very hard to rate how they're going to do next week, because it's one of those things where, yeah, it was so balanced, but the resistance, like, again, like, I think Port, in terms of total effort, like, this was actually better than the Geelong game. It's just systematically, it was worse than the Geelong game. You know what I mean? It's just like a different area that absolutely collapsed.
Yeah, Sydney played so much differently than they did in the game against GWS. In the game, even in just games from the regular seasons, that they started fast. They didn't do what they had done all season long and start slow. They managed to surprise Port and play somewhat differently in that first half.
I actually don't think they did per se. Because I will actually say Port initially defended Sydney's transition excellently. They didn't allow the corridor, made it all go wide, and they, sort of kept Goulden under.
I mean, the scoreboard, didn't really tell a story very much in that first half. But the way that Sydney approached Port Adelaide's defense was definitely a lot different than they had against the previous teams.
Yeah. I'm talking about, like, in terms of pace. Like I said, like, Sydney had... I don't say, like, they had... Like I said, for a team going against a team that was fairly set up in transition fairly well, I think Port, after the Geelong game, fixed that a lot. But, as I said, when it goes the other way, I said, all you need to do is wait for that turnover. And Sydney knew that and were very comfortable. So like, in terms of, like, yeah, they had a fast start, but that's because they, like, knew that when they had their opportunity, they were going to score. Like, they weren't playing fast per se, I'll say. But yeah, as I said, it was very calculated more than anything.
Yeah, I agree. I had the votes for... Oh, actually, before I reveal the MVP votes for the game, it has been confirmed from this game that Callum Mills has been ruled out of the grand final.
Yes.
So that there will be at least one change for Sydney, and there will be one change as well for Brisbane, which we will touch on in a moment. So who do you see, whilst we're just still on Sydney anyway, who do you see possibly coming in for Callum Mills? Would you think like a Robbie Fox or... actually, this might open the opportunity for
Taylor Adams potentially.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Able to make his way in, but it's very difficult to say.
Yeah, and look, as I said, Robbie Fox, he was the sub, wasn't he? Look,
I think so.
I'm gonna say, I skipped through a bit of that last quarter. I was like, I didn't have the votes. I don't need to.
I don't know if he was a sub or if it was listed as main emergency, but I do remember his name on the sheet somewhere.
No, he was playing. He was playing.
Oh, he was? Okay.
Definitely. Yeah.
It might open up the opportunity for Taylor Adams, but it's very up in the air right now.
So he was sub. He played 18% of game time, so it's very hard to judge. So I would actually imagine they're probably going to play Taylor Adams and keep Robbie Fox as a sub. Honestly, Robbie Fox is just not a consistent player, and I've said this before, especially when Rowbottom and McKenzie were down for Sydney. How like Robbie Fox, Sam Wicks, like their depth weren't really standing up. So I don't actually think that they will. I think they will just put Taylor Adams straight in there. They'll, as long as he's fit and ready to go, because he obviously can't tell outside the club. But yeah, I said I would imagine that would just make the most sense. Play him more as a, you shuffle around. Again, I think also the confidence that Nick Blakey played deeper and played really well is that you could play Taylor Adams as the higher halfback. You don't have to have him play defensively so much. Yeah, so I think that will happen. And hell, you could even put him in the wing and play Jake Lloyd at halfback if you really wanted him. Have him like play on the wing, go into some centre contents. But I think the flexibility with Adams is just too much in a grand final not to go to as like an on the field pick.
Yeah. Harry, your thoughts?
Sorry, I've just seen breaking news come through. I actually just got notified on my phone. Charlie Dixon.
Oh, I think I know. Yeah,
officially retired.
Called it quits. From the Power.
Well, yeah, we were talking about this earlier that we kind of expected it to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I completely zoned out because I got that notification and it got stuck in my head.
No, you're good.
I'm happy to wrap it up at the end. But
we'll go talk about that at the end. But yeah, just your thoughts on what Sydney may look like this week.
Look, I think Taylor Adams, I think, is a bit on the fringe for Sydney at the moment because I feel like if they wanted him in, they would have initially chosen him before this, before the announcement that obviously Callum Mills can't play. So I feel like if they had the sub from last week there, I've forgotten his name already.
I'm pretty sure it's Robbie Fox.
Robbie Fox.
Fox. That's probably the direction that they're looking to go into more so. But I think Taylor Adams can still be on the fringe pick there. I don't think we'll see that many other changes though.
No, Sydney. Probably will just be a 1-to-1.
Yeah, it's just one.
Yeah. So I mean, the only issue with Sydney that I see is if anyone else gets injured in the middle of the grand final, if one of their key players gets injured, I don't think they have a lot of depth outside of that now, really.
Oh, it's a bit harsh to say that, but I just think Sydney don't have much depth at all. I just think it hasn't been tested this year, and they come into the grand final.
They haven't really had a need to massively test their depth, because they've just had such a good role at it.
Well, when it was, they were pretty crap. So it's just sometimes you need a bit of luck. They'll be forgotten in like 5 years' time if they win the premiership. No one's going to say they won the premiership, but like no one looks back at the side and say, yeah, they had a good injury run because, it's just expected that you need a bit of luck there. And, even compare it to Port where, I said, I'm disappointed at like some of the halfback, but, we lost two of us halfbacks at the same time, It's like Logan Evans, revelation at the back half of the year. He has a rare bad game. I thought, Josh Sin, is that players like that, so, I said, so we're getting into the sort of depth that you don't really want to rely on. I will probably talk about it in a bit after the votes in terms of like wrapping up Port, but as I said, it's a blessing for Sydney that they haven't had to. But geez, as I said, Robbie Fox, Sam Wicks, and they've had this problem for many years. Like they've been playing people like Rose, Foot, Luke Ronke, Ronky too stronky. Only had 2 really good games and didn't do all that much. You know what I mean?
Don't talk to me about injury this season.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like you would be I think you just going for Brisbane out of spite more than anything.
Honestly, I'm still undecided at the moment.
Yeah.
As much as I dislike Sydney as a city, I don't mind Sydney as a team.
Yeah.
As much as I love Brisbane as a city, I don't like Brisbane as a team.
I'm going against Brisbane solely because Joey Danaher exists.
Yeah, I respect that. I respect that opinion.
I love Mo. I don't care. It's just so.
Before we jump over to that though, I'm just gonna quickly go through our MVP votes because I should before we forget. So player that gets 5 points is Isaac Heaney. I don't think anyone is surprised about that. You know, he's had a thrilling final series so far.
Yeah.
4 points.
I just think
is Chad Warner.
Top 2 is definitely not much between them at all.
No, not at all. Third is James Rowbottom. I thought he had a really strong game off half back. Joel Amati gets my 2 points. I thought he actually provided very well up forward. You know, which is very rare for Sydney at this point in time. You know, we've talked up and down at length about how inconsistent their forward line has been. And then my number 1 point is to a Port player, and that's Jason Horne-Francis. On paper, even just on the field as well, it just looked like he was the only one that really gave it his all. He was leading for most statistics, at least on the Port side anyway, so I felt like it was deserved.
Yeah. I mean, look, I disagree with the fact that, you know, I said, I don't think Port will, like, not trying, but, like...
Oh, no, like, of course they were trying. It was a final, but...
Yeah, I know, but, like, I agree with you. Like, Jason Horne-Francis, and I'll still say Aaliyah, like, they were trying to find sparks, and, you know, they were the most consistent at still being a positive influence. Like, someone like Trent Boak were trying to find a spark, but he was a bit hit or miss. And basically still, like, you know, ranked pretty well in terms of statistics. But you saw, like, his impact, you know, like, you know, he kicked a goal that was really fantastic, but also had, like, a really bad turnover. One of the ones where, as I said, they just got Sydney that arm's length where they felt like they could be safe. So very bit of miss. Something like Jace Burgoyne. Again, still solid considering his age, but, you know, turned over a tiny bit. But, yeah, I think Jason Horne-Francis and Aaliyah were, like, my 2. Yeah, I think you can really hold your head high still after that match.
Yeah, completely agreed. All right, let's jump over to the second final now. MCG, Saturday night, Geelong versus Brisbane. Another neck-and-neck final, like Hawthorn and Port Adelaide, like the battle for the bridge in week 1. It was absolutely thrilling to watch as an impartial viewer, as much as I was really hoping that Geelong didn't make it, and I'm glad that they didn't. There was the magical clearance heroics from the middle to be able to allow Brisbane to burst through, score some very, very sneaky goals. There was a miracle catch on the forward line by Joe Danaher to save their chances. And overall, it was very, very interesting to watch. If you're a Brisbane supporter, because it shows that even when your key ruck goes down, you still have ways of finding victory, I guess is what I'm going for, especially with Joe Danaher having to go into the middle for a lot of that. He did not touch the bench once, by the way. He was one of the only players that had 100% time on ground. I will talk about that. I believe it's in my notes. But it's like, yeah, I wasn't expecting, when Oscar McInerney went down, I was not expecting like that midfield to still function the same way that it did.
It's sort of weird because...
You go. I was just going to say Joe Danaher needs to be studied. He needs... There's something about Joe Danaher that needs to be put in a test tube and studied, because he's the weirdest player that I have ever seen play AFL
He's
football.
Extremely hot and cold.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, as someone who grew up most of my teens, like, obviously, Port supporter, I know, like, he's not as good, especially as a forward, but Justin Westhoff reminds me so much of Joe Danaher in the sense that the more you expect them to get a goal, the less likely they are to get it. Like, you know, 20 meters right in front, might as well write it off. When you're finally like, oh, he's going to miss this. I always write him off. He kicks it through. And then he just does some bull crap on the boundary line, and he just slots it. And it's just like...
That's me and Shea Bolton.
I guess. It's like...
But
it's so weird.
The thing with Bolton and like a lot of players similar to him, at least for us, is that when they have to think about it, like specifically, lining up for set shots, they will always miss. When they were playing on the run, they will get it right off the bat. It's so weird.
Yeah, but I think the problem with Joe Danaher is he literally plays like he's Shea Bolton. You know what I mean? He's just like trying to burst off, run around people, take bounces, and it's just like, dude, I mean, you see when you watch him, like, he's obviously coordinated, but he still looks like, a baby giraffe wobbling out of, the mum's womb, just trying to find his feet. It's just...
not wrong.
It's just, he's got this aura where he can just pull it off in the most insane times. And yeah, I said absolutely. That's why I personally love him. But, if you're... I know a lot of Essence supporters were very frustrated with him. I thought he got a bit of a hard knock there, but obviously he's definitely one of the most, again, pulling out the word dichotomous players in the AFL. I still think overall a net positive. I think he's one of the better. I'd still take him. Not as the first forward I'd pick, but when you get into like 5 or 6, that's probably when I would.
Yeah, I agree. So the scoreline, so the scoreline overall was 12-13-85 to 14-11-95. Again, it's completely down to the wire up for the last 3 to 5 minutes. One of the players that I want to highlight, which should have polled more in the Brownlow, considering he won it last year, is Lachie Neale. He was pretty much the midfield bull for them, finishing with 31 disposals, 16 contested possessions, 6 marks, 12 clearances, 5 tackles, 16 pressure acts, and 460 meters gained. He was matched up against pretty well, but, still did what he does. Their work rate in that midfield with him, Dunkley, McCluggage is insane.
Yeah, no, actually had a bit of a different take on him, and I mean, you'll see when it's my votes. Like, I still think he had a pretty fantastic game, but it was definitely a bit more in the back half. For me,
his first half was very quiet.
Yeah, but as I said, it's just, as I said, that lift, like, what you were saying, like, when you lose someone like Oscar McInerney, like having a player like Lachie Neale, who doesn't exactly need the best hit out, because he's pretty good at adjusting on the fly. He's hard enough to get that ground ball possession. I think he might have led. He led ground ball gets for the night. So it's just 12 clearances as well.
Mm-hmm.
Really solid game. It's just as I said, a bit of that. A bit of the link up and all that wasn't quite great for him, but still an absolutely fantastic night.
Absolutely. I want to shout out Jack Payne. I thought he was quite underrated because he's one of those players. He's been a bit of a fringe player, not usually known, not really spotted when he's actually in the team. But I thought he stepped up massively, even though there was a risk of him not even playing this week because of the injury that he sustained last week. But he finished with 11 disposals, which a low amount, but it was at 81.8% efficiency, 5 contested possessions, 7 intercepts, which was huge off that halfback. 8 pressure acts and 9 1%ers. So he was fairly consistent on his one-on-one matchups.
Oh yeah, as I said, it's so weird. Like, and like I've said this before. Like, I think this finals matchup, is like, it's so weird how like offense is going to be like the showcase. Most teams, a great defense will probably separate the best teams at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it's pretty much offense. And for Brisbane, like, I would say, like, their best players were mainly in the defense, which is insane for Brisbane. And obviously, I don't even think their best... Well, I think it was pretty game. Like, probably the worst defender was Harris Andrews, which is, like, insane.
Which is rare.
So, yeah, exactly.
Only 12 disposals in the game. But I think you're correct with the Brisbane defense, because if you're looking at the stats from Geelong, like, they completely shut down Geelong's marking game at all. Like, if you compare the stats here, 64 marks to Geelong to 111 from Brisbane.
Yeah, the intercept game was insane for them.
Yeah. Like, they just completely shut down any form of Geelong aerial game throughout the entire match.
Yeah, and as I said, it was by very good marking. And again, I don't want to spoil like my player base. There's like someone that I will point out, that really made sure that there was just no separation, really frustrated their opponent. And, and as I said, it's not just him, it's other ones. Again, I got a few, because I had such a hard time voting, I've like made a bit of a shout out list.
You've had like what 11 players at some point.
Yeah, there was 11 players. So in my notes, I've got a 8.5 tier players in that game because I thought there was a lot of absolutely fantastic players there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Speaking of that backline, Dane Zorko, of course, I'm going to shout him out. Like his running off halfback has been really, really good for them all year long. And when you want to step up massively, you do it in a final. So he finished with 32 touches, 5 intercepts, 8 marks, 3 score involvements, 19 pressure actions, 766 meters gained, which I believe was highest for the match and possibly highest across both prelims.
10 rebounds, yeah, as well.
Absolutely, yeah, as well. Like he did so much work. Him, Payne, even Harris Andrews, even though he was the quietest out of that back six, it's. That entire defensive effort was like next to none.
Yeah, for sure. Like, yeah, again, like with Zorko, I think again it was a bit more a tale of two halves. I think in the first half it was a bit ordinary, but I said his disposal started getting a bit better. He provided a few more key intercepts coming off players. I think he, started reading the game a bit better. Honestly, it's amazing though. Like, probably he was going to be like the best halfback.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, left the game. Like Max Holmes, he was looking to be one of the best finals performance. I like in my mind, I was like, yeah, it's going to be hard for Maxie not to be the best player on the ground after the first half, and then unfortunately, left due to injury. But yeah, there's a lot of good back half movement. In the first half for Geelong. And then eventually in the second half of Brisbane, it shifted. So unfortunately for Geelong, they sort of, didn't make it in the part of the game where you want to have the leading score at the end of the day.
Yeah, pretty much. The other part
inaccuracy doesn't help that either. Sorry, Blake.
No,
inaccuracy woes do not help that either.
Absolutely.
Obviously, Geelong, they had their first quarter where they scored 1 goal 5.
Yeah, they did.
They brought it back in their second quarter and they scored 7 goals 2, I believe, in the second quarter. Or they scored 6 goals.
It was like, no, yeah, like 5, 6, or 7, something like that.
They scored 7 goals 2 in the second quarter, 2 goals 1 in the third, but they were just kept quiet. That's nothing to do with accuracy. But then your fourth quarter, when you're only trailing by 2 going into the fourth quarter, to only score 2 goals 5, like if you're just a little bit more accurate there, you make this game yours.
Yeah. It's the strangest thing this season because we've seen all year long that teams that you expect to be super accurate have just been absolutely woeful in front of goals.
Yeah, I will say it's a bit discrediting to Brisbane because I think a part of the reason was because they shut down the small forwards so much. Like, obviously, Graham Myers had an absolutely fantastic game, but when you look at, either, what am I thinking of? Stengel, when you think of Brad Close, had a pretty bad game in front of the sticks.
I thought he wasn't even playing. I didn't hear him get called out until the fourth quarter.
Yeah, like he had a few score involvements. Blackface didn't actually register a score, so they kept him, to pure distribution. Mano is the one I was thinking of, 1 goals 2.
Yep.
As I said, I think it was just when you think about the shooting, like, it was okay from general play. It was 10-6 to 2-6, but you know what I mean. It was just a lot of. I guess a lot of pressure was put on, to bring some of those shots that normally for Geelong they slot from that wide slot that they like to go to on the boundary line. But again, as I said, Brisbane, you were like, made most set shots wide, and Geelong returned to average.
Yeah,
it was it was a bit of a shame because their forward line pressure was absolutely fantastic. But I said like it's a bit of tales for two times because Geelong were a lot better from the back half. But forward half, I'd like to go through the specific scores. Brisbane 8-3-51 from the forward half. Geelong 3-10-28. So similar scoring shots.
Insane.
It's just as I said, their forward line pressure because again from halfback. I think, most halfbacks, I don't think there was like a single one that I can say was like really bad. You know what I mean? It's just, conversion in the forward line. There were a few players that were a bit off.
Well, speaking of Brisbane's forward line, I want to talk about Kalamachi for a minute. He became Brisbane's leading goal kicker for the night. And I think overall he's had a really, really good season. Like, prior seasons, he was mostly like a fringe player. He could barely break into like a consistent forward role. He was kind of rotating in the midfield for a bit as well. And yeah, now he's just surprised everyone with that forward line. So he finished the night with 3 goals from 11 touches at 81.8% efficiency, 3 marks, 2 goal assists, 6 score involvements, and 14 pressure acts.
Yeah, again, one of the players that was very back half for Brisbane. But man, was he just slotting him. Like, Archie has got to be like one of the more, I don't want to say smartest players, but I think in terms of that mix, as I said, like he's really good because is that, obviously you got players that can provide a lot of spark like Cam Rayner, Charlie Cameron, and Kyle Lohman. But except maybe with the, Charlie Cameron obviously distributes a fair bit. But I think Kalachi, as I said, it provides that synergy where you got 4 really solid players that can play in that forward line. Obviously, Cam Rayner rotates a fair bit. But, they all provide that little bit that's different. And, I guess that's, although like Geelong have same in terms of quality, like Close and Myers play very similar to each other. And, then you got that... and then it's all pretty much Tolls and Stengel. So in terms of diversity, I think that's what separated those two forward lines. Whereas, as I said, I think apart from some really nice plays on ground level, as I said, Geelong just really struggled finding those conventional shots.
Yeah, completely agreed. However, there was a bright spot for Geelong's forward line, and that was Ollie Henry. He kicked 4-1 from 15 disposals, 7 contested possessions, 6 inside 50s, 10 score involvements, but only 8 pressure acts, which means there was not much forward pressure from him, but at least he was able to convert when he did get the ball in forward 50.
Yeah, that's not really his role.
He's much more sharpshooter.
Yeah, but as I said, he played fantastically as that lead-up target. Obviously, we were talking about the Tom Hawkins versus
Shannon Neal.
Shannon Neal for that spot. I think Shannon Neal still deserves to play. I don't have any reservations about Scott not playing him. Maybe Tuohy you could argue, but I really don't think there's anything much in this game where you can say a pure selection cost them anything. Especially when Tuohy would probably play in that halfback line. And they had absolutely no problems there.
Speaking of halfback, that's where I'm going next, actually.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's any surprise. Tom Stewart is the player that I picked off halfback. I thought he had, considering how the Geelong's halfback backline in general kind of looked, I think he was probably the most standout, which is kind of normal for him. 22 disposals again at 81.8% efficiency. Seems to be very common this week. 11 contested possessions, 12 intercepts, 5 marks, 7 score involvements, 10 pressure acts, 4 1%ers, and 512 meters gained. So he was pretty much just doing the same he normally does.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, one of those things where I guess I'll talk about it a bit later because, spoiler alert, he did make my top 5 list. But yeah, no, when Holmes went down, he was having an okay game. But he was like, you know what? We need someone running off halfback. It's been working for us. I'm going to be that guy. And there was just like no drop off in quality when that switch occurred. And again, like this is like a team losing. Again, who I rated was by far and away the best player up at that point. And, for Tom Stewart to just fill that role, play really well. And, as I said, like, 7 score involvements off halfback, is really indicative of how good he is in terms of generating. And then those intercepts, I don't think I actually thought he defended it well, more up the ground than when he was playing a bit deeper. So, as I said, he just really found that comfortable and had a really big impact.
Yeah, I completely agree. Harry, you got any overall thoughts on?
I'll be honest, I missed a lot of this game, unfortunately. I was actually in Sorrento playing cricket while this game was going on.
Fair enough.
So I only managed to catch on to a couple of the highlights from things. One of the things I did want to point out was even with Oscar McInerney going down, Brisbane still dominated clearance games. The midfield for Brisbane still dominated clearances, and they were losing hitouts quite handily. 57 hitouts to Geelong to 27 from Brisbane, and obviously that just comes.
I think Danaher only had 9 overall anyway.
Yeah, that comes along with the territory of having Danaher going into the ruck and not having that more consistent ruckman there. But even winning those hitouts, Geelong were absolutely smashed in clearances. I mean, not smashed, but 43 to 33 clearances when you haven't got the opponent's primary ruck there. You need to not to be too harsh on the Geelong ruck, but it needs
Stanley,
to be Stanley. It needs to be more into you need to be getting it into the hands of your midfielders more often to get those clearances. And it's been an issue with Geelong for part of this season as well, is that their midfield sometimes does have those quiet moments.
It happened a lot when Dangerfield went out injured, because normally he would be the main distributor of clearance rate. But yeah, when he came back, he had some great games, but it just wasn't enough from him.
And he wasn't bad in this game either, but only 5 clearances for the game, 24 disposals, 15 of those being handballs. It's a pretty quiet game from someone who, like you said, is your main distributor in your midfield.
Yeah, and it's like, he had the 5 clearances, but he also had 5 free kicks given away against him. So it was sort of just that period. And I will say 5 clearances actually topped for Geelong. I think it was the best clearance getter for the Cats.
That's alarming.
Yeah, as I said, I think he had a solid-ish game, but definitely separated a bit from the better performances of the Cats lineup.
Yeah, completely agreed. So we've already touched on injuries. Max Holmes with a left hamstring, Jack Henry with a right ankle, and then obviously Oscar McInerney with the left shoulder, strapped it up, went back out there, dislocated it again, and then was completely subbed out and has been ruled out for the grand final. So before I fold that into just a quick preview for the grand final itself, do you want to go through your votes?
Yes. So again, I won't go through too many of the stats because we've sort of talked about a tiny bit. For the 5 votes, I went Hugh McCluggage in the end. It's a bit weird because stats-wise, there were other Brisbane midfielders that did better, but I think he was one of the few players in this very topsy-turvy game to play a very full game. I think he was one of the few players that every quarter he had a positive impact. 27 possessions, 14 contested, 11 ground ball gets, 78% efficiency, 6 clearances, 6 score involvement, 7 tackles, 23 pressure acts, and a goal. So again, I'll just say because he's the number 1 player. Then we go Tom Stewart again. We mentioned it before. But yeah, very high intersect game, a lot of score involvements, and of the best half players, his lift was probably the biggest behind maybe Cam Rayner, I'll say. Then we go down to Brendan Starcevich, one of the 2 really big defenders of the game. his role of shutting down Stengel, I thought was absolutely fantastic. And he also contributed offensively as well. A bit less than some of the other ones, but he kept Stengel to 11 disposals at 36% efficiency, 2 marks, 3 shots for 0 goal 1, and, as I said, still put the ball on the other way. So for 2 votes, is a bit maybe controversial because, he really had one big quarter, but Graham Myers in the second quarter was by far and away one of the best quarters I've seen. 2 goals, socketed to Henry, who's dead to rights. But I also put him just for his forward pressure, because I think Geelong's forward line, it was very, there was a lot of good pressure, but Graham Myers was the only one to capitalise, and I think there would be a bit further away. I don't think they would have converted as much if it wasn't for him, considering that, they weren't scoring from set shots, so they needed Graham Myers' involvements on the ground level, which is why I put him fairly high, even though a lot of his impact stats-wise was in the second quarter. And then rounding it up, Jack Henry, pretty hard not to put a 4-goal performance outside of it. But he also still had 10 score involvements and 6 inside 50s, so he was just a lot of forward generation. And to sum it all up, I will put the players I considered for the votes, just because it was so much and it's a very big mix. So for Brisbane, I had Froggy Lester, Darcy Wilmot, Dane Zorko, Cam Rayner, Zach Bailey, Cal Archie. And for Geelong, I had Zach Guthrie and was there another one? Oh, maybe not. Anyway, so apparently I just put Zach Guthrie. There may have been another person. Probably Max Holmes, considering, as I said.
Yeah, I probably would have put Holmes as a consideration.
Yeah. I probably just, didn't put him there because he had, but as I said, I already sung his praises, so, But I must admit, I was very disappointed that I wanted to put Froggy Lester for 1 point, but I, couldn't tell whether it's just because I loved him as a person, as a player.
You do have a little bit of bias with him.
Yeah, but no, he played absolutely fantastically that game, so I'll give him a bit of a shout out. He's never normally one you see in, the best on ground sort of contention, so shout out to him.
Okay, so I am currently showing on screen the full tally that we have for both eliminated teams and alive teams. For the eliminated teams, Jai Newcomb is our leader at 8. That's probably not going to change because of how the grand final will work. And then for our alive teams, we have Isaac Heaney leading with 10 points, with Zorko and McCluggage both trailing behind at 5. So the only way that we could get a 3-way tie is if Heaney polls 0 votes in our grand final voting. I don't think that'll happen because it's Heaney. Of course, he's probably going to get at least 1 vote from one of us. But yeah, no, this has been really fun to do. Actually, just give individual votes for the finals.
Yeah, and it's sort of weird because obviously Heaney's the only one of the alive teams to get multiple votes, which is just, I think, fairly coincidence because, we discussed before, a lot of the players that probably could have polled to, Dane Zorko being one of them. I forgot who we mentioned. I need to look.
McCluggage.
McCluggage. Even Lockie Neal, I think, but they're all contending for the 1 vote sort of thing. So, as I said, I don't think there would have been many players breaking 5. But yeah, Heaney's just by far and away the biggest impact. As I said, arguably coin flip between him and Chad Warner for the Port game, but definitely deserves to be 10 votes and, make it very hard to beat. Obviously, if you don't know how the grand final's going to work, me and Blaze are both going to vote, and the way it's worked out, we can just add them on. We don't need to average or anything because no one's polled in more than 2 games so far. So that means, we can just add it up on the end. Whoever wins.
Pretty much. And, I mean, I may as well just fold this into our grand final preview. Do you think he's going to be a very significant chance for the Norm Smith?
Oh, there's a significant chance for the Norm Smith. I mean, he's almost certainly going to win this, unless he has, a, very bad game or he gets injured. He only needs 5 votes, and with his form, it's very hard to see him not getting, but who knows for that. But Norm Smith, I mean, we'll probably put, I haven't really thought about it, but
no, because you've got to think about the one-on-one matchups now. Because it's
crazy. I guess, but I mean, Brisbane just have so many options of players. Like, you know, I said, obviously, like Lockie Neal, sort of the one you get, McCluggage. Cam Rayner, if he puts 4 quarters, can definitely be it. But I think a lot of the times it is like a spark player. Oh, sorry, who was that?
Zorko.
Zorko, yeah. But you know what I mean? Like, of the consistent ones. But yeah, there's always a chance that someone like, I don't know, like, you know, as I said, like, even Kalachi, Kyle Lohman, you know, those sparks, Charlie Cameron, of course. And of course, defenders just never really get it unless you're a halfback. So if it's a halfback, it's probably going to be Zorko or maybe someone like I don't know. I don't think Jake Lloyd or Rampy would win it. Maybe a Blakey.
I think Blakey's definitely a chance. He was the name that came to my head.
Yeah, as I said, it'll be hard to see, but yeah, and said the midfield's just got too much top end talent for me to think that there's anyone weird. Maybe a Goulden wins it on the outside, but I mean Goulden also goes into a lot of inside contests, so really hard to say.
My only big concern is rucks. What are Brisbane's options?
Right, so
Darcy Fort.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I think you have to go Darcy Fort. They do have a recruit that they picked up during the draft, I believe. Callan Lane, I believe.
Yeah,
Lane? Yeah,
that sounds right.
But I don't think you're gonna put a 22-year-old
into a grand final
debut into grand final. Hey, you could. It's happened. We've seen debuts in grand finals happen before.
Marlon Pickett.
Yeah. But I don't think you need someone who has at least a little bit of experience, at least, especially going to the ruck. It's such a crucial position. Yeah. So
look, Darcy Fort as like a pure backup ruckman has got to be like one of the best backups in the league. Like normally you're just having, you know, you're lucky if it's like a scrawny 23-year-old kid, you know what I mean? So, you know, they have a privilege to where, you know, obviously Oscar McInerney hurts because, you know, he's still in the top half of ruckman for the year probably. But yeah, as I said, Darcy Fort, you know, he's serviceable. We've seen him in times where Geelong's been. I think the other thing too is, Geelong. He's come from a system in Geelong where they haven't relied on rucks for years on ends, so he knows how to play that role as well. So I definitely won't be saying, you know, Brady Grundy, you know, expecting to have field day because I definitely think he's struggled in the back half of the year, and I don't think honestly, it's crazy. Like, you know, the best ruckman of these final series has probably been like Jordan Sweet. You know, look, Reece Stanley might be a chance to be top 3 in this regard. Like, it's crazy. So, yeah, Lloyd Meek as well. I think he was okay against Port and definitely really good against the Western Bulldogs. So, yeah, as I said, obviously Oscar McInerney probably would have if he didn't get injured, but
Darcy, just to give context as well, Darcy Fort's played 2 games this season, one against Collingwood in round 3, and the last time we saw him was round 7 against the Giants, where he got 27 hit-outs, 11 disposals, and 8 kicks as well in that.
Yeah.
So we'd like to hope that he's at least been showing good promise in the VFL.
Yeah.
I will say, in that game, he only had 1 hit-out to advantage of his 27 hit-outs. So
it's never been
he was also up against Kieran Briggs, to be fair. Like, Kieran Briggs has also been one of the
That's
top
true.
rucks of
Kieran
the year.
Briggs is, yeah.
But yeah, as I said, it's just one of those things where I said I should first off probably should explain Darcy Fort for those who aren't nerdy enough to actually know who Darcy Fort even is. Because yeah, I wouldn't blame you for not knowing. Used to play for Geelong for about as a backup ruckman for what would have been 7 years.
3 years. 2019, 2020, 2021.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's only I must have been a mature age pickup. Or maybe I just don't know the history of Darcy Fort as well as I thought.
He may have been picked up in 2017 and then
he played 8 games in 3 seasons at Geelong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, he's been on the list for longer than he's played games. I know that. Yeah, so but yeah, he's definitely you know, Yeah, he's 32. He's got body well enough to play. So I think you just got to back him in. And it's really not the worst possible outcome. But I expect to see Danaher just flung into the ruck, especially if they need a spark, and it's not quite happening.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he was serviceable enough as just like a little chip ruckman, like against what team were they playing against? Geelong. So like we know it can work, but it'll just be that matchup between the midfielders, so how much of a difference it's going to make.
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, it's like if of all the teams that don't necessarily need a ruckman, I think Brisbane's got to be up there. Like they don't play that way, obviously, because Oscar's just pretty
good. He's pretty good at the game.
Yeah, exactly. But like the way that their midfielders work, they're very good at finding their own ball. They don't need to be guided as much as other midfields per se. As I said.
Yeah, it's mostly going to be. I think this battle is mostly going to be won in that midfield. I'll be honest. There's just so much elite talent in there that it's going to be all about their transition and how they move the ball.
Yeah, I actually disagree. I think it's off halfback.
Yeah.
I really think that both teams have solid enough midfields where they'll both have periods of the time they're going to dominate. Obviously, both forward lines. I know they score differently. But like they're going to have periods of time. But I think the difference between the two teams, and we've seen a bit this year, is both teams like to score from their back half reasonably. I mean, obviously Brisbane a bit more from the midfield, but I think they've gotten better over the year scoring from their back half. And I think if they can get some accurate movement from there, it's going to be very hard to see them not scoring. Because both teams. Like Sydney obviously shut down movement a bit more, but it's going to be very tough matching up against that working half Brisbane midfield unit.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, if you could look honestly, I will be interested to see I'm probably not going to find the stat, but I'd like to see forward 50 conversions in a final. I would as a combined average, I think it would be higher than most. Obviously you had years where Geelong obliterated Port. Maybe a bit of wishful Freudian there. But obviously very one-sided. Whereas this, you've got two teams. This week they played good defensively one-on-one. Historically, over the last year, a bit flaky at times. So hopefully a very high scoring game. But yeah, I definitely think the more avenues and the more consistency you'll get in the overall movement, will probably end up separating these two teams that can score very quickly.
Yep, I completely agree. Harry, your thoughts?
No, I agree. I think it's going to be a really high-scoring game as well. But I genuinely think with it being so high-scoring and Brisbane, like you said, being flaky at points in this season, it's hard to go away with anything other than Sydney are really broad favourites going into it at all. It should just be them going into it as the favourites.
On paper, absolutely.
On paper, definitely. I like what Brisbane have done, especially towards the tail end of the season. They have looked really good. But I just think that they're missing something. And I think now, especially without Oscar McInerney there to anchor in the ruck, where, like you said, they might not rely on Oscar, but he's definitely a key piece to their puzzle. And I think without that, it's going to be really hard for Brisbane to keep up with Sydney at all.
Dark counter argument.
Honestly, like I said, I might as well say, I would actually tip Brisbane for this match.
Ooh.
Honestly, I think of Brisbane's defense, they actually defend Toll reasonably well. And I think that's and I think, just as I said, you see separation from teams, Sydney scoring so much from that midfield. But against Brisbane, where their midfield engine's so good, and you've seen them against other really strong, consistent midfield engines, Sydney's fallen a bit short this year. Think games like Freo, the other game against Brisbane this year, which Brisbane won, Western Bulldogs. I think that they might actually fall short just because it's a big ask. And I know you leave it all on the table. I know it's a finals. But for Sydney to run out that game both ways, it's going to be a pretty tough ask. And I don't think Brisbane need to defend as much, if that makes sense. Giving Sydney's forward line aren't as on paper threatening as say Brisbane's is.
I would agree with that point. I think Sydney's forward line is definitely their weakest part of it. But I think that Sydney's defense this year has been pretty good. I think their back half has been pretty good. But then their midfield has just been so elite. And I struggle to see how Brisbane are going to shut that down. And then have the forward pressure as well, especially if you are going to throw Danaher into the ruck a lot more because you don't have McInerney there. You're losing a lot of that presence in Brisbane's forward line, and I think that Sydney are going to really punish that as well. You are right, though. The last time that these two teams played, round 19, Brisbane did come away with the win. It was a 2-point win, 79-77. Thrilling game.
Yeah, I wouldn't put much stock into the result of that influencing this game, but you know what I mean? It's just...
the question I have was, is that during the time when Heaney was suspended?
I don't think so. I think Heaney's suspension was against a dead rubber team.
I can find out really quick. It was around 17,
I will
right?
say it was the period where,
around 19.
Again, McInerney and Rowbottom were both out of the side. So, again, that might be even a point to Sydney. And look, as I said, I'm not saying I'm tipping Brisbane with any extreme confidence. It's just who I'm tipping.
I've already put my money on Sydney. I need to back them up.
Yeah, okay. But you know what I mean? It's just it's really just a gut feeling. Again, I mean, look, all tipping is a gut feeling, but yeah. It's just, you know what I mean? It's for as much as I think there's things going against Brisbane, I just think a lot of their pros match up really well against Sydney. And I think sometimes in finals, especially, just team matchups are way more important than they are in the regular season, because in the regular season, you're looking for consistency. And then in the finals, it's all about, going all out and getting that separation. And I think there's just a few more avenues there's a few more easy avenues, because obviously, again, against Port, their forward line can come together again. I'm not necessarily expecting that. So yeah, that's why I'm tipping Brisbane.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair enough. I just expect this game to be a really good game in general.
Yeah, that's what I'm for.
The intensity of this game is going to ramp up so much throughout the game as well. I think it's going to start off as a slow simmer. You know when you're putting something onto cooking, you kind of started off on low heat, and then you start putting in more ingredients, and you're like, well, I'm going to turn up the temperature now. I feel like that's what it's going to be like here. It's going to be just everything is just going to continue boiling and boiling until that fourth quarter, where everyone is just throwing themselves at the footy, throwing themselves at each other. And I think it's going to be messy, but also really clean at the same time, if that kind of makes any sense.
How long until Tom Papley throws a punch?
Third quarter. 10 minutes into the third quarter.
Yeah. I reckon a bit earlier, because I think Papley could get frustrated early. As I said, I think it will be a bit of scoping out. It's just, again, the reason I think it will be high scoring is because after that first quarter, I can definitely see both teams, they're able to get runs of 4 or 5 goals. Both of them have that in their arsenal. And I think it will happen a bit in momentums, just the way the team play. But, as I said, we've seen both teams have made comebacks, against, different teams. And obviously, Sydney obviously had the benefit of having that slightly easier matchup in the prelims. Thank Port for that. Although I never think it's that good. I always think it's a team closer in the closer matchup that plays a bit well straight after, you know what I mean? But I don't think that's enough to decide a grand final. But you know what I mean? It's just I definitely think there's just strings of possibility in this game. And it's really exciting because, it means that, a team might go down a bit if you're a supporter. Don't rule out your team. You might have a few pits in your stomach if they go down 4 or 5, but, hang in there because both of these teams offense just comes in a flash.
Yeah, I think this first quarter will be really important, though. I think I think the team that wins this first quarter may possibly just win the grand final. It'll be close, and I think there'll be lead changes and there'll be shifts in momentum. But I think the first quarter, if you win this first quarter, you probably will win this grand final.
Well, with the way Sydney's played pretty much all season long with their slow starts, that would indicate a Brisbane victory right off the bat.
But also, Brisbane have been doing the same recently, right?
Yeah,
only recently. It's funny because, in the regular season, they're one of the best starting teams, and in the finals, it's completely flipped. Like I said, Lions and Sydney are probably the two worst teams in terms of, well, I guess Sydney against Port, but even they weren't quite, foot on the pedal. It was just, as I said, a bit scrappy. So, yeah. I guess technically Carlton were pretty bad in their first quarter, so one game sample size.
I think... Is there anything else we would need to touch on for grand final? I think that's it. So let's end this on a little bit of a sad note. Let's talk about Charlie Dixon since it was just announced. Sarah, do you want to do the honors?
Oh yeah, it'll be a bit ad lib, but yeah, sure. Absolutely fantastic servant to Port. Every year he's been there. I know he's been down. I think the down years of note were his initial year at the club and, kind of the last 2 years. Last 2 years because of his body and, the first year was sort of just gelling in. But what I always loved is, despite him not always playing the best, he would always crash packs. I know it would be frustrating to some Port fans with the way that Port play, but I've always had the impression that Charlie Dixon plays exactly how Ken Hinkley wants him to play. Despite, whether it's going well or badly. So I've always appreciated about him. He's one of the harder workers. And definitely, it's a bit of a thrill ride, Charlie Dixon, he can just as easily kick a few clutch goals in a row, than to also, get angry and give away a 50-meter penalty. It was a bit of a mad lad, as some would say. But yeah, obviously the other side of that, was the pressure of him in that inaugural Gold Coast side. I thought, he started off pretty solidly as a skinny little kid. And, as I said, in a pretty unsupported forward line, I think it's a bit underrated how solidly he was for the Gold Coast. It was definitely a really good pickup, especially that 2015 where he averaged 2.6 goals per match. As I said, it was just, I think Paul also got a bit lucky because, people forget he was a bit stop-start in terms of injury at the Suns. People say he banged up at the end, but Port were the only team to actually get 20-plus game seasons from him. 2021, he played all 24 games. 2017, he played 23 games. So, yeah, honestly, 2-2-1 games for a forward with pretty pronounced injuries to his body, obviously he's going to suffer a bit. I hope not hugely, but you know what I mean. He's going to have, soreness for the rest of his life because he played so hard. But, as I said, it made me always appreciate him. And I know when he was going bad, it was a bit frustrating, but that's why I'll never, have a bad word. Because his effort was always there. He put his body on the line. And I don't think you'll see I don't think you'll see a modern player go as hard into packs as Charlie Dixon did.
I agree, he was always touted as an old school forward just by the way that he played. And it's definitely something that we are missing in the kind of modern era of football.
Yeah, as I said, it's a bit way to play. Obviously, preservation-wise, you would recommend your players going to wide leads occasionally, even for separation. And I guess that's one thing going against Charlie Dixon. He played in one of the least diverse forward line attacks. As I said, I won't discuss too much about Ken Hinkley until the off-season. But obviously from that game, you saw what was probably by far the weakest area of any Ken Hinkley teams. Is their midfield to forward line connection and their forward line structure. And Charlie Dixon, despite some of the most vanilla entries, would always try and make something work from them. Same with Jay Schultz as well beforehand. So I was very lucky. Oh, sorry, Port. Yeah, Port were very lucky to go from Schultz to Dixon. And, even now, I know Todd Marshall probably should retire. I hope he does, just for his health. But we're very lucky to also have Georgiadis in the wings. And, maybe we balance that with either Ollie Lord or, as I said, maybe we get fingers crossed, Jack Lukosius. And, hopefully the torch will pass on and Port will make the most out of their terrible entries inside forward 50. But to Charlie Dixon, we salute you. You made the most out of two clubs that didn't necessarily have the best forward line structure, but you played your heart out to make the most of it and had an absolutely fantastic 221 game career.
Definitely one of those players that in the long term probably deserved a premiership. Like Broke is also one of them. Pavlich, obviously, way back when, is also one of them. Like it's just these big time players that everyone kind of loves, even when sometimes they do things that people don't like. But like one of the players that overall fans of the club love and feel that they don't get the highest honours that they should get, which in terms of AFL as a whole is a premiership.
Yeah, I mean, look, as I said, again, it depends on how you want to rate careers and all that sort of stuff, because, as I said, I will say, like, the modern conversation, I'm glad that it sort of shifted away from, just needing the premiership to have a good career and all that sort of stuff. As much as we tend to focus a few on, like, individual efforts, there's also a lot more recognition for some of the cult players, due to, online discussions like these where we can, talk about our favorite sort of players from all that, to the wider audience. And yeah, as I said, obviously Charlie wouldn't play like a cult player. He played like he was the main center stage. He was definitely a dominant force in that Port forward line. And yeah, as I said, I'm not necessarily sad he didn't win a premiership. I just think, in terms of microcosms of importance in sport, Charlie Dixon is probably one of the more underrated reason why Port's able to go from finals to finals instead of bottoming out. Because yeah, we've definitely had some teams where we could have been much worse than we actually are. Again, like, Port, it's funny, like, Port's had some times where, they've said, oh, they'll make the finals for sure, but we're playing a forward line of Charlie Dixon and Robbie Gray, which is absolutely fantastic. But then, like, Sam Gray, Aaron Young, Jarman Impey when he was forced to play forward line, and I mean, even this year, I didn't really mention it, as I said, Will Korchak, because we're playing Frankie Evans and Jackson Mead. It's unfair to put it all on Charlie when, we didn't really have the soldiers around him to really, add to it as well. But, as I said, in terms of, when he's playing his worst, you can still sell that, he goes into contests very proud. And yeah, I'm proud of you, Charlie. I don't know, you'll never hear it, but bless you.
Harry, any final thoughts on Charlie Dixon?
No, he's had a stellar career. I've followed him with great interest as someone who was younger. I used to love watching him play, especially around 2017 when he, in my opinion, that was his best year of football. I think if I have a quick gaze over at my other monitor here, leading goal kicker for Port in 2017 and was also the runner-up best and fairest.
Yes, he was.
Port in 2017. So, I mainly remember him from that time, and then he kind of fell off my radar a bit because, like Rick says, kind of underrated, really. Like, just not someone I really thought about as too much of a player. And obviously, that just came from me not watching a lot of Port Adelaide games in general. But it wasn't a name that popped up all too often either. So, definitely someone I looked at when I was younger, but as I stopped watching a lot more football and as I stopped having a lot more time to watch football, going to uni and things like that, definitely a player who fell off for me a little bit. But I am sad to see him go. and he has had an exceptional career given the two systems that he's been a part of.
Yep. I completely agree. So just because we didn't mention all of his honours, he did actually make All-Australian in 2020. Runner-up Coleman medalist also in 2020. I can't remember who won in 2020. Anyone have that information for me?
Would have been Mackay first one?
I'll look it up.
Mackay. I feel like it would have been like a Mackay, Kerno, or like a Cameron.
No, it would have been one too early.
Something like that.
No, I think it might have been.
Mackay was 2021. Kerno was 22. Yeah. 2020 was Hawkins.
Hawkins. Okay.
Only 42 goals in that season as well.
I mean, it was also short and quarters.
It was short season, yeah.
And then other club honours, he again runner-up best and fairest in 2017, leading goal kicker in 2017, 2020, and 2021. He won the Marcus Ashcroft Medal for being best on ground in the Q Clash in 2015, and the Gold Coast Community Award in 2014. So, maybe not the highest of honours, but it's still a very, very impressive season, and we love that he was a fantastic servant for both Port Adelaide and Gold Coast and the AFL as a whole. All right. I believe that is actually everything. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, but thank you for having me on the show. It was awesome to be here.
Thank you so much for coming along. Sarek?
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, because obviously, the whole year, it's definitely been very lucky to have focused on Port, considering them doing so well. So it's probably nice for the balance of this show to have like another fan club represented. So
let's go.
It's a bit. It's a bit hard because, as I said, I think Blaze has done an absolutely fantastic job, considering
his team.
Considering we are literally
yeah. So, as I said, but as I said, absolutely great to have you on. I thought your insights about the Giants are pretty spot on. And, hopefully, maybe in the future, we might have you on again.
Absolutely. I'd love to have you on again for one of our off-season matches when we do, like, team wrap-ups and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that sounds fun.
Hell yeah. All right, so that will do us for this week. Thank you all so much for watching, for listening. If you're in the live stream, thank you so much for just coming to hang out with us as we talked random nonsense for 2.5 hours. You can go find Harry at HarryBCasts on Twitch, Instagram, and Twitter. Not that your Instagram is used all that much, I have noticed.
Yeah. But I think the last post on my Instagram was, Jesus Christ, 2023, maybe like October of that year.
Close enough. It was still worth mentioning. But yes, you're predominantly active on Twitter and on Twitch. You're also involved in Overwatch casting for AoE and for Disconnected Esports, such as yesterday and the next week or so with the Disconnected Esports Open, which I am also a part of. So go check us out there when we're active. Obviously, you can find Sarek and I here every week. We will see you all here next week, of course, for episode 32, where we will run down the grand final and whatever happens there, because we have no idea. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So again, thank you all so much, and hopefully you all enjoy the grand final, whoever you pick. If you're a City supporter or a Brisbane supporter, may your best team win. And we will see you all next week for episode 32. Catch you then.